What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Arius and the Nation, and right now we are about to unpack, wait for it, the graphic is coming down, Leicester City Football Club. We are diving down the club's history. So first and foremost, back on the channel is the Soccer Tavern, our good friend Dave. Make sure if you haven't, hit the subscribe bell. Subscribe bell? There's no bell. What? The subscribe button, notification bell, like the video, share it with your friends and family and pets.
Soccer Tavern, where we're discussing the history, culture, and philosophy of the beautiful game. My name is Dave, and in this video, we're talking about Leicester City Football Club's history. Pull up a seat and let's start the discussion. Leicester City FC is located in the south central part of the city of Leicester. Leicester is located in the central part of England in the United Kingdom. The club currently play in the Premier League, and its home ground is called the King Power Stadium, which opened in 2002 and holds 32,262 people. The club was founded in 1884, mainly by former students from the Weigeston, which is spelled like this, school, who wanted to keep playing soccer outside of their academic institution. The group met in a garden shed behind the Fosse Road House and established the club's name as Leicester Fosse Football Club. In 1919, after the end of World War I, the club was in financial trouble and were overtaken by new owners. The new owners dropped the Fosse from the club's name and added City to appeal to a wider fan base. The club became Leicester City FC and have been so ever since. In the club's early days, it went through a number of different nicknames, including the Fossils, the Royal Nuts, the Hunters, the Sockers, and the Tanners, but none of them...
The Royal Nuts. I love that. Hunters, Sockers, Tanners, Fossils. I don't know, man. Hunters, alright. Tanners, meh. Depends. Fossils, though. Anyway, that's funny. Royal Nuts.
Really stuck. In 1948, the club introduced a fox into their crest to be worn on matchday kits due to the region's association with fox hunting. Though this happened in the late 40s, the club didn't officially adopt and embrace the Fox's nickname until the 1980s, but they've been using it ever since. The club has more or less used the same crest since 1991 with some slight branding updates over the years. It's a relatively simple crest with a fox head in the middle of a cinquefoil flower surrounded by the club's name in a circle. The flower comes from the city of Leicester's coat of arms, and it can actually be traced back to the Middle Ages, with the first Earl of Leicester, Robert de Belmonte, using the cinquefoil in his coat of arms. And the fox comes from the strong hunting tradition in the area for centuries. Overall, pretty straightforward.
What? I mean, come on. You guys talk about history. Like, it's awesome. What can I say? We don't have that. We don't have that deep-rooted history. Like, our history, I know you guys cringe when I say our history. You're like, dude, your history's yesterday, man. Like, I get that. But, man, it's just, it astounds me on how rich your history and this culture of football is. And I understand that these videos aren't even a taste of what it really means, or I'll put it this way: at least I want to dive down into it, and I thought this way would be the best way to do it. Get to know the histories, what makes and for lack of better words, we need to re-update these videos. There need to be more videos like this. Hell, I'll bring you guys up. We can make these videos if we do it enough, and I'll bring each and every one of you from your respective teams. That'd be fun. But anyway, all right, back into it. Sorry, rambling.
I'd like to discuss 3 important events in the club's history in this section, all of which have occurred this millennium. First up, on October 21st, 2002, Leicester City officially went into administration or bankruptcy.
Wow.
The club had recently built a new stadium, been relegated from the Premier League, and was over £30 million in debt. On that same day, however, a consortium of investors led by former player Gary Lineker and local businessman David Ross agreed to buy the club and take them out of administration.
Okay.
After 4 months of negotiations, the club came out of administration on February 13th, 2003. The club has since changed ownership a handful of times, but without this intervention to bring the club out of administration, the club may not even exist today.
Wow.
Now, the next event I want to discuss happened about a decade later. On April 3rd, 2015, the Foxes sat at the bottom of the Premier League table, 7 points from safety with 9 matches remaining. The club picked up a win the next day to climb into 19th place and proceeded to go on an improbable run of 7 wins, 1 draw, and only 1 loss to end the season in 14th place and maintain their spot in the Premier League.
Wow.
After the run, the club was hit with a scandal, though, that summer that saw the removal of Nigel Pearson as manager and Claudio Ranieri as appointed as manager in July of 2015. Ranieri had tons of experience managing at big clubs, but was considered old and kind of incapable of winning a domestic title after many of his sides finished in second place. And that brings us to our third event I'd like to discuss.
Yes.
Leicester began the 2015-2016 season as 5,000 to 1 odds to win the Premier League title. With the poor performance the previous season and the turmoil that the club experienced that summer, which we just talked about, even the loftiest of fan expectations had the club finishing mid-table at best. Incredibly, all of the stars seemed to align, and the club rode a wave of undiscovered or underappreciated players who were all on the form of their life and combined that with limited injuries to win the Premier League title.
What?
The story is still insane to believe, but on May 2nd, 2016, Chelsea FC drew 2-2 with Tottenham, which meant Leicester City FC were Premier League champions.
That's awesome. So talk about a Cinderella story. You go from being bankrupt to scandal to playing the best football of your life, but it needed to happen. Oh my God, I love it. I love when a team can rise to the challenge, and that exceeded everyone. I love that. Yes, that's great. Where's that movie? My God, that's awesome.
The club was presented with their trophy and honored at a ceremony that included Andrea Bocelli singing before their match on May 7th, 2016, a date which will forever remain in the club's folklore. For decades, the club has run out onto the pitch while the post-horn gallop has played. The song was originally used to announce the arrival of male coaches back in the 19th century. So how does it relate to Leicester City FC? Well, back in the 1930s, a man used to play the song on a lone bugle as the players ran out onto the pitch. This tradition has continued over the years and makes for a unique entrance to the field for the club and its players. And it was all started by a supporter almost a century ago.
That's awesome. See, that's cool.
I'd like to highlight 4 players in this section. Gordon Banks was one of the greatest goalkeepers in history. He won the 1966 World Cup as England's goalkeeper and is known for making the save of the century on Pele in 1970, but by that point he was no longer on Leicester. Gary Lineker started his career with Leicester, having graduated from the club's academy. He went on to have a great career and is a famous pundit for the Premier League these days. Riyad Mahrez, who is currently on Leicester at the time of recording, was the first African player to ever win the Pro Footballers Association, or PFA, Player of the Year award, and he remains the only player in Leicester's history to have won this award. And finally, Jamie Vardy joined Leicester in 2012 from Fleetwood Town. Vardy's story is one of perseverance and determination as he played non-league soccer into his early 20s. Wow. Most people in England are written off by that age, but he kept working and got his move to Leicester. He's since gone on to score boatloads of goals in the Premier League and made his way onto the English national team. Cool. Also wanted to give a quick shout out to N'Golo Kante. I know he was only on Leicester for 1 season, but I absolutely love his game, love his work ethic, his professionalism, and all of that. And so he's a special 5th player I wanted to give a mention here because I think he's one of the best defensive midfielders in the world right now. I'd like to discuss 4 managers in this section. Matt Gillies is the club's long...
So remember, guys, all this stuff... 5 years old. Even though what he's talking about is sort of timeless, it's already part of the history, sort of already part of the makeup of Leicester's football club, the Leicester Football Club, pardon me. But yeah, I just want, and also, you know, you guys, we need a pause once in a while, right? I mean, I'm in this, I'm listening to every word this man's saying, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. What else can you say? Like, oh no, we're the club that went on that Cinderella run. And then automatically, you could just say, hey, we're that that crazy come from behind, crazy odd story, and you know what it is that they're talking about. So let's dive back into it.
Longest ever serving manager and guided the club to its first ever major trophy, the 1964 League Cup. He also led the club to their most ever cup finals. Martin O'Neill won 2 League Cups and reached another final as manager of the club in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was one of the best runs in the club's history. Nigel Pearson helped guide the club through the second division and kept them in the Premier League against all odds in that 2014-15 season that we discussed earlier. He was fired that summer after a scandal and was replaced by the next manager I wanted to mention here. We couldn't end this without mentioning Claudio Ranieri. He was manager of the club's historic and triumphant season in the 15-16 season. He took over a club likely to be battling relegation and with 5,000 to 1 odds to win the Premier League title. He shocked everyone and managed the club to be Premier League champions in one of the most unlikeliest stories in soccer or sports history.
Now, one of our good friends of the channel, Laz, he told me that someone put £5 on them winning the whole thing, and then because of them winning, he became a millionaire. That's kind of cool. That's very cool. Wow.
Still unbelievable to this day. Leicester currently don't have any rivals in the Premier League, but their biggest rivals are Nottingham Forest, Derby County, and Coventry City. All 3 clubs are from the Midlands, which is also where Leicester is located. Nottingham Forest are Leicester's biggest rivals. Beyond just being in the same physical area, the rivalry goes all the way back to a match from 1909 when Forest beat Leicester 12-0.
12-0? Oh my god. Oh, did they not show up? What happened in 1909, man? Oh my god. That's wild. I don't think I've ever... 1909, 12-0. That's a crazy number. Wow.
That remains Leicester's worst ever defeat in their history, but it can be explained a bit. Reportedly, players for Leicester were hungover after a player's wedding the night before. The clubs have met over 100 times in their existence, and this rivalry remains intense. Leicester's rivalry with Derby was aided in recent decades with big victories for Leicester in the 1990s in the promotion playoffs and in the Premier League. That was followed up by big victories for Derby in the mid-2000s. The rivalry has faced...
Real quick, guys. I don't mean to cut this guy off. Now, okay. So, this thing on the screen. I thought, do you pronounce that Derby or Derby? Because I know when the two matches happen, or when a match happens against 2 rivals, that's a derby. But this is it looks like a football club's name. So... It's a football club, so would you pronounce that Derby or Derby County? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much.
Aided a bit with Leicester becoming a stable Premier League club and Derby slugging it out in the Championship. Fans do still keep the rivalry going, though, especially when the clubs meet.
So it'd be sound like a freaking Muppet off of Sesame Street, Derby.
Meet in cup competitions. And finally, Leicester's last main rival is Coventry City. Okay. In the first decade of the 2000s, the 2 clubs played in the same division and had a number of fierce matches against one another. The 2 towns are separated by less than 20 miles, and the rivalry is called the M69 Derby in reference to the road connecting the 2 towns. The reality is both clubs consider other clubs as their main rivals, so this rivalry isn't quite as intense as the other 2 mentioned, but it is still worth mentioning here. The stats and records we're about to discuss are as of March 2018, which is when we are recording this video.
Attention.
Leicester have spent 51 seasons in the top flight in their history. The club has 4 major trophies, including 1 Premier League title and 3 League Cups. Nice. The Fox's record first-team league appearance holder is Adam Black with 528 appearances. The club's record goal scorer is Arthur Chandler with 259 goals. Nice. Leicester's record transfer purchase was Islam Slimani from Sporting Lisbon in Portugal on August 31st, 2016 for about £29 million. Wow, And the club's record transfer sale was N'Golo Kante to Chelsea FC on July 16th, 2016 for about £30 million.
Wow.
And one last interesting fact about the club, Leicester have won the English second division title a record 7 times in their history.
Woo.
So, there you have it. A bit of history on Leicester City.
All right. Shout out to that guy. All right. Thanks for being there for this journey for real. If I can give you guys more of a mix of videos, I will try to, but if I can't, this guy is always there. This guy's he's done his due diligence. Maybe some things are off, but like what we said on the 101 Facts video over on Embrace the Suck 21, he gets the conversation started. So, man, shout out to him, shout out to his channel, The Soccer Tavern. Shout out to you, bud. Thanks for doing what you're doing. Up to bat, we are checking out the full history of Liverpool Football Club. Cue graphics. All right, this comes from our friend Footy Adventures. Cool. I think this is the second video we've had of him up here, so he does a pretty good job breaking it down. So let's go ahead.
We now know Liverpool FC as a huge global brand, but as a city it has been put on the map by music and culture and art, but probably most prominently around the world through football. 6 European Cups, 19 league titles, 7 FA Cups, 8 League Cups. Liverpool FC are one of the most successful clubs in world football. But how many of you know the full entire history of the club from March 1892 when Everton moved out of Anfield to Mohamed Salah now scoring and breaking records left, right and centre with every season that passes? How many of you know of that first ever team of just complete Scottish people, the team of Max, to the team now?
Wow.
Well, I'm going to try and cram the entire history of Liverpool into this one video, so yeah, if I do miss anything out, then do drop it in the comments below. I've done this for a few big teams around the country, Celtic and Rangers and stuff, and other ones as well, so yeah, as ever, if I do miss anything out, just stick it in the comments below. Look at this, we've got another lovely, sunny, nice day for it, but yeah, where better to tell you about the foundations of LFC than the very pub that they themselves were formed in.
Love the fact that they were formed at a pub. Yes. It is on par with everything else. I mean, I'm going to have to be pausing here and there, but I want to try to let this man who is very knowledgeable of this club. So let's see. But yeah, pub. Hey, let's get together at a pub, grab a few pints and create a football organization, football club. All right. Let's go.
And yeah, here behind me is the Sandon pub, the pub where Liverpool were formed. I was going to have a pint and tell you about their early history, but they aren't open today. And here they are, look on Holding Street. The founder of Liverpool was called John Holding. He has a bust next to the stadium just up here. So yeah, let's go down there, and that's where we will start talking about the early life of Liverpool FC.
Super cool. So is that real estate that's right by the stadium? Is that like super expensive because of the stadium? Let me know in the comments. Because over here, if you live near a NFL stadium, yeah, that's your house is worth more. So anyway, just a question.
And here he is, the founder of LFC, John Holding. Before we get into it, guys, please do remember to smash that like button, subscribe if you're new, and pass the vlog on to someone else. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now, yeah, here is John Holding, the owner of Anfield originally back in the 1800s, and a local team called Everton were playing here. And over a rental dispute, I think he tried to put up the prices. Everton said, "We're not playing here anymore." That's
funny because we did hear that on the Everton video. So that's kind of funny. It's just funny how all these clubs are just interconnected. And I feel like you get that sense of interconnectivity when you're not really spaced out that far. Because to be honest, over here, it's just unfathomable that the only thing I have to compare it to is the American Football Club or American Football League. So the NFL, the National Football League, all right? It'd be insane if one American football team shared a stadium with another American football team. or in this case, they would separate. But anyway, sorry guys, I'm being sidetracked. This is good. I don't mean to be pausing it this much, and we're back in it.
It's too expensive for us, we're going somewhere else. They went to Goodison Park. All John Holding was left with was an empty stadium here opposite where he's looking right now, and that empty stadium he wanted to fill with a football team, his own football team, who he called Liverpool FC. And he started the club from the pub where we were earlier, just down the road down there, the Sandon. In Liverpool's first year they joined the Lancashire League, and their first game was a friendly against Rotherham, and they beat them 7-1 with a team made up completely of Scottish people, and they became known as the team of Max. So yeah, I'm going to have to do a video eventually of the Scottish influence on Liverpool. Of course, it stretches from Andrew Robertson and who else? We've got Kenny Dalglish and Graham Souness, but all the way back to the first ever team with, the team of Max. All 11 were from Scotland, and the captain that day was a man called Andrew Hanna. Yes, he was the first ever captain of Liverpool from Renton in Dunbartonshire. I have made a Renton video before. I've spoken about them a couple of times. They are a now extinct football team, but used to be legendary, and even played West Brom for the Championship of the World once, which I believe Andrew Hanna was a part of as well. So yeah, he was an absolute legend of the game in those early stages. And played in England and Scotland and was Liverpool's first ever captain. But amazing for me to see it come full circle, making vids about, teams like Renton who aren't very well known, to now being here and speaking about Andrew Hanna, a former Renton player who was the captain of Liverpool in their first ever game. Liverpool won the Lancashire League at the first time of asking, and the next season were accepted into the Football League due to the resignation of the Football League of Bootle. In 1896, 4 years after the club's foundation, a Geordie by the name of Tom Watson became the manager of the club. Under his stewardship, Liverpool became Football League stalwarts and even won their first league title with him as the manager in 1901. He would lead Liverpool to a few top tier titles and a second tier championship as well, and would even get Liverpool to the much coveted FA Cup final in 1914, where they lost, sadly, against Burnley. To this day, Tom Watson remains the club's longest serving manager of 19 years. He was also the first man in England to lead 2 different clubs to the league title, the other being Sunderland. And here we go, look, all around Anfield you have these little benches which say the men who built Anfield, and now seems like the best time to sit on this one, Elijah Scott, while I tell you a little bit more about the club between what we were just talking about then, Tom Watson, the early league titles, and 1959 when the club's fortunes would change forever. Now, I don't want to gloss over anything, but yeah, around the time of that first league title under Tom Watson, the Boer War, or the Second Boer War rather, was raging in South Africa. A Liverpudlian fighter apparently died in a battle there on a steep hill called the Spion Kop, and that is why the steep stand here at Anfield also has the name the Kop to this day, also known by fans as the Spion Kop, or I've heard it called the Spion Kop before. I think that maybe how you pronounce it in South Africa, where of course the Boer War was. But yeah, essentially the Kop is named after a big hill in South Africa where, a lot of Liverpudlians, or a Liverpudlian soldier lost his life. I think there was a regiment of people all from Liverpool who fought in that war. There probably were a few, to be honest, and that name stuck for the stand here just due to that reason. So back to the football. In 1905 Liverpool won the second division, and 1906 they won the first division, becoming the champions of England for a second time. In 1914 Liverpool lost the FA Cup final against Burnley. That is Burnley's only FA Cup to this date. A year after the Burnley loss, Tom Watson died suddenly, the manager, and his reign here as Liverpool manager came to an end. After World War I, during the 1919-1920 season, yes, over 100 years ago now, King George V became the first reigning monarch to ever watch a game of football, and that was between Man City and Liverpool. In 1920, the Kop got refurbished to house 30,000 fans, making it the biggest stand in the country. During the 1922 and 1923 seasons, Liverpool won back-to-back titles, and this man here, Elijah Scott, missed only I think 3 games in that winning run, and nice. The legendary goalkeeper was absolutely class. And look here, a quote from Dixie Dean: "The greatest I've ever seen. Inspired by the goalkeeping heroics of Elijah Scott, Liverpool FC, the dominant force in England during the early 1920s, were crowned Football League champions for a second consecutive season." There you go, backing up what I was saying there about Scott not really missing many games, and being part of the back-to-back winning seasons. It was around
the fact that this man only missed 3 games in a time period where people were basically brawling with brass knuckles and clubs, that's impressive to say the least. All right.
This time as well in the 20s and 30s that Gordon Hodgson, Liverpool's 3rd highest scorer of all time, was banging them in for the Reds. Elijah Scott left the Reds in 1934, and he is still the longest serving player of Liverpool to this day. The Football League was cancelled during World War II, and but regional football leagues were still going on for players who who maybe coal miners. I've spoken about Jock Stein before. He was a coal miner, didn't fight in the war because he was a reserved occupation, so he could still play football, and that would have been the case here for Liverpool. But there was no national football at the time of the Second World War. It was more regional leagues, of which Liverpool won theirs. I believe they won the regional Northern League back in that time, or one of the regional competitions. Anyway, they might have won a few as well, but yeah, basically during World War II they were playing regionally instead of nationally. In the 1946-47 season, Liverpool were crowned champions. The first post-war season Liverpool won the league. It was around this time that another Liverpool legend was starting to play for the Reds, and his name was Billy Liddell. Reds fans around the world must have heard of the phrase Liverpool before. An absolute legend, a man from Fife. I've been to Fife before, made numerous Fife videos, and yeah, good to chat about him here now. What an absolute legend of the club. I can't believe I'm brushing over so much stuff here. Billy Liddell and yeah, his era of the club could do with like a whole vlog of its own, basically. Really? After the 1947 title though, Liverpool wouldn't finish higher than 8th for another 7 years. The 7th season resulted in them finishing 22nd and getting relegated from the top division. That was in 1954, and the relegation ended a run of 50 straight years in England's top flight. 8 seasons in the second division ensued, but it was some point around this 8 years in the second division, it was 1959, that Liverpool's fortunes would change forever. So yeah, a big turning point in the club's history was the appointment of Shankly in 1959, and he famously wanted to turn Liverpool into a bastion of invincibility. And yeah, you can see the Shankly statue over there, and yeah, the images that are just on screen just now. And I have made a Shankly specific video before. I've mentioned it a couple of times. I'll leave a link to it down below. So yeah, do go and check that out afterwards. I've been to where he was born and stuff like that. Amazing place, Glenbuck. Yeah, check it out. But yeah, at his time of arrival, the club had been in the second division for like 5 years and had even suffered an embarrassing defeat against Worcester City in the FA Cup. Anfield was reportedly a mess, and Shankly even described it and Melwood, the training ground, as a shambles. He overhauled the squad, releasing around 20 players, and even converted the legendary boot room into the amazing coaches and tactics room that we've seen over the years with other legendary managers like Paisley and King Kenny and all those kinds of people. It was around this time as well that Shanks bought Ian St John from Motherwell, and in 1962, after 8 years in the second division, Shankly finally got them promoted, and they've been in the top tier ever since. Roger Hunt began to emerge at this time as a Liverpool hero and was the top scorer for 8 seasons in a row. In 62 they got promoted from the second division, in 63 they came 8th, but in 64 they won the top tier title, winning it for the 6th time in the...
So just to be honest, guys, this is a lot. My goodness. So this club has been active and like just 50 year. They had a 50-year run before being relegated. That's crazy. That has to be. Is it up there in the history of Premier League teams? Is that the longest run without being relegated? Let me know. These are just questions. I need to know these things. I learn through the comments, guys. Thank you so much in advance for those comments. All right, man.
The club's history. 1965 was the year that Liverpool finally lifted the elusive FA Cup, beating Leeds in the final. And yeah, I've got to take you somewhere to talk about this. 2 seconds. So it had been Liverpool's first ever FA Cup win, 1965, and here is a mural to celebrate it. And Ian St John was the goal scorer that day, or the goal scorer of the winning goal at least. And look at this from Bill Shankly. That was the greatest moment of my life, winning the cup, not for me but for the people of Liverpool. Despite being such a massive club and winning the league even like before they won the cup, Liverpool hadn't won the FA Cup until 1965. That was some 94 years since the competition actually began. And yeah, it was Ian St John there on the left, who you can see there, who scored the winner that day. Shankly stayed at the Reds until 1974 and even guided them to their first European trophy in 1973. That was the UEFA Cup against Borussia Mönchengladbach, and yeah, Shank's idea of turning the Reds into a bastion of invincibility was starting to ring true. They were starting to become very successful. They'd won a UEFA competition, but he wanted them to be one of the prime clubs in Europe. He did win the UEFA Cup in 1973, but it would be his predecessor, the man who took over after him, that would lead the Reds finally to European glory at the highest level.
I love that, man.
And so in 1974, after coming runners-up in the league and winning the FA Cup for the second time, Bill Shankly retired, reportedly being quite tired of the work he had put into the club. Former Liverpool player and assistant manager Bob Paisley took the reins from Shanks. I'm sure people were nervous for when he took over, but they shouldn't have been, because now look, he has a statue here in his honour. Bob Paisley spent just shy of a decade as manager here and won 6 league titles, 3 League Cups, 6 Charity Shields, 3 European Cups. The first manager to win 3 European Cups, by the way, 1 UEFA Cup and 1 Super Cup. Whoa. He is only one of 3 managers to this day to win 3 European Cups. The other 2 are Zidane and Ancelotti. Joe Fagan took over from Paisley and won the European Cup and won a European Cup of his own in 1984, and Liverpool's 4th, in total. In that season that Joe Fagan won a European Cup of his own, he also won the league and the League Cup, and Ian Rush scored 47 goals. However, it would be the next season that would be remembered for more devastating reasons. I could tell you about Shanks and Paisley and Joe Fagan and the great football of the 70s and 80s, but at this point in the video I do need to touch on the Heysel and Hillsborough disasters. A collapsed wall and fan trouble resulted in the death of 39 people, 39 football fans, at the European Cup final in 1985 when Liverpool were playing Juventus. Now known...
Wait, what? Alright, I'm backing it up just a little bit. Alright. Hold on, what did he say?
Fagan and the great football of the 70s and 80s, but at this point in the video I do need to touch on the Heysel and Hillsborough disasters. A collapsed wall and fan trouble resulted in the death of 39 people, 39 football fans, at the European Cup final in 1985 when Liverpool were playing Juventus. Now known as the Heysel disaster, of course, for the stadium that it was played in Brussels in Belgium. The trouble and the fallout of that meant that English clubs couldn't compete in Europe for the best part of half a decade. Liverpool did finish champions in this time and missed out on competing in the European Cup, but there was also teams that had won the League Cup who should have been playing in the UEFA Cup and competitions like that.
So why did they not go back to Europe, like the what do you say, the UA Cup, the European Cup? Was that for safety precautions? Like if one stadium had like structural damage, did they just across the board just say, you know what, better to err on the side of caution, just no one else go over there until what, they can test it? Or why was that chunk of time important? What was happening in that chunk of time for them to be able to go back over there and play? Let me know in the comments, please.
You look at Oxford United and Luton Town. Everton even should have got into Europe a few times with how well they did in that point. But yeah, it was obviously just a tragedy, and we should remember the people who died on that awful day in Brussels. And there is a memorial to that here at Anfield as well. But I'm just coming round now to the Hillsborough Memorial, and there is a little bit of work going on just above it. But here we are now at one of the most famous football memorials in the world. At Sheffield Wednesday Stadium, Hillsborough, on the 15th of April in 1989, Liverpool played Forest in the FA Cup semi-final, and 96 fans would lose their lives. 96 Liverpool supporters died, and it was due to gross negligence by the police and ambulance services that day, and families of the 96 have had to fight for decades for justice for their loved ones. There have been disasters in English football history, and I don't mean to compare them in the slightest, but the Hillsborough disaster is probably the most well known around the world. The 96 will always be remembered by the people of Liverpool, whether you're blue or red. And you can even see that, look, there's even Man United shirts down here. This is where rivalries get put aside, and yeah, we just remember the people.
I like that. No, this is horrible, and I'm going to figure out more about this disaster. 96, oh my goodness, my heart breaks for that, man. But I mean, it's terrible that it takes a tragedy like this to bring fans of the sport together. Other than the World Cup, the only time there's unity is when there's loss, and that's unfortunate. That's my little soapbox. But I will be getting to, the Hillsborough disaster. I will be releasing something today about that, or tonight about that. But yeah, guys.
Paul, who sadly died that day. There's a Villa hat down there. You often see some Everton stuff as a West Brom shirt over there. I hope you're enjoying this video and that I do a good job at telling you the history of Liverpool Football Club from the good to the bad. And yeah, this video is in memory of those who died during the Heysel and the Hillsborough disasters. And here we go, look, more the men who built Anfield, and this time look, Kenny Dalglish, the man who led Liverpool through their darkest hour during Hillsborough. Liverpool did actually go on to win the 1989 FA Cup final in an emotional final versus Everton, around a month after the Hillsborough disaster. Kenny was now the manager, and yeah, in the 89-90 season, Liverpool won their 18th league title, and that was the most by far out of any English club. Little did we know how long Liverpool would have to wait for another one. In the 32 years between Shanks in 59 and King Kenny in the early 90s, Liverpool had just 4 managers. But in the last 30 years, Liverpool have had 9 managers. The 3 seasons after Kenny left, Liverpool finished 6th, 6th and 8th, leading to a period of instability for the club during the 90s. Liverpool went through quite a bad stage during the 90s and early 2000s, winning just 1 League Cup in around 8 years. By the 2000-2001 season, Gerard Houllier had assembled a team of older, experienced pros and youngsters who were coming through here at the club. Liverpool won the treble of the UEFA Cup, the FA Cup and the League Cup in the 00-01 season, with future legends like Steven Gerrard and Jamie Carragher coming through, and Michael Owen. Say it quietly, since he went to United. You hear the likes of Carrot and Stevie speak so highly of Gerard Houllier, and he really laid the foundations for what was to come for Liverpool in the next 10-20 years. So post Houllier, we've obviously had Rafa, and then Dalglish again, Hodgson, Rodgers and Klopp. So we've had a couple of managers over the past, you know, like few decades or decade and a half or whatever when Houllier left. But yeah, Houllier really laid the foundations for, you know, Rafa's Champions League winning side, and from all accounts what he did was modernise the club and yeah, brought in better systems when it came to fitness and professionalism and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think the club has a lot to thank Houllier for. In the last sort of 15-16 years, Liverpool have gone on to win 2 more European Cups, 1 Premier League title, the first in of course 30 years, as well as numerous other cups and League Cups, Super Cups and that kind of stuff. There's been more finals, League Cup finals that we've lost against City, and Europa League final that we lost against Seville, of course. So, you know, it's been a mixed bag for Liverpool, but I think most fans would have taken 2 Champions Leagues and a Prem, maybe at the start of the decade, or at the start of the century, rather. But yeah, from John Holding and Tom Watson in the 1800s to John Henry and Jurgen Klopp in 2021. I hope I've covered enough about the history and, yeah, haven't missed too many things out. But if I have, let me know in the comments below.
Much love, guys. Let me know in the comments. This is how I learned. This is how I learned that extra layer of what it is to be a fan of Liverpool. Let me in, let me know. That way I can see what sort of beef up the history. This guy did a phenomenal job of, I think, of things that I would have wanted to know. He'd let me know, and he's done his due diligence. He's done his research for sure, because he came off with that stuff real quick, quicker than I could have. I would have just been reading and it would have been so dry, but he did a great job. So shout out to this guy, man. Manchester City Football Club. You are up to bat. Cue graphics. Bring them down. Anyway, we're back again with our good friend, the Soccer Tavern. We love him here.
Culture and philosophy of the beautiful game. My name is Dave, and in this video we're talking about Manchester City Football Club's history. Pull up a seat and let's start the discussion. Man City is located in the eastern central part of the city of Manchester. Manchester is located in the northwest part of England in the United Kingdom. The club currently play in the Premier League, and its home ground is called the Etihad Stadium, which was originally built for the 2002 Commonwealth Games, with Manchester City moving in a year later. It holds 55,097 people.
All right.
Man City's history can be traced back to 1880.
Biggest stadium so far that we've checked out, but it was built for a specific reason, like I don't know. Yeah, okay, so there we go. So size wise, that's pretty big comparatively. All right.
80, when the St. Mark's Church Cricket Club decided to form a soccer team. Shortly after the formation, though, the cricketers became upset with the soccer players tearing up the cricket pitch. Within a few years, the soccer club split and merged with another soccer club to become Gorton AFC. Gorton was a reference to the area of Manchester where the team played. Okay. In 1887, the club moved its headquarters to Hyde Road and changed its name to Ardwick AFC. By the 1893-1894 season, the club experienced serious financial trouble after a very poor season in the second division. Most of the board of Ardwick AFC resurrected and restructured the club in April of 1894.
That's crazy.
Along with the resurrection, the board changed the club's name to Manchester City Football Club to try to appeal to all Mancunians or people from Manchester. The club has 4 nicknames, all of which are pretty self-explanatory. They are the Blues, the Sky Blues, the Citizens, or simply City. Both the nicknames of the Blues or Sky Blues come from Man City's kit color. The club has worn shades of sky blue dating back to when the club changed its name in 1894. The other 2 nicknames of the Citizens and City come from the club's official name of Manchester City, though lots of other clubs use the word City in.
So I've heard City and I've heard Blues. So, cool.
Their official name around the world due to Manchester City's rise to power in the global soccer world over the last decade or so. Many people nowadays will assume you're referencing Man City if you just refer to City. Man City's current crest debuted in the 2016-2017 season, but it shares a lot of similarities to crests used throughout the club's history. The ship is a reference to the city of Manchester's famous shipping canal and actually comes from the city's coat of arms. The red flower is a red rose of Lancashire, which is the historic county that Manchester is located in. Quick redistricting history for you. In 1974, there were changes to local governments in the United Kingdom that removed the cities of Liverpool and Manchester from the Lancashire county government. But Manchester still remains in the historic boundaries of Lancashire County, hence the rose. Back to discussing the crest. The diagonal stripes in the crest come from the Grelly family coat of arms. The Grellys were the feudal lords of Manchester, and the Manchester City coat of arms includes many elements of the Grelly family crest. The crest includes the name of the club, Manchester City, and the year of 1894 when the club was formed in its current iteration. The crest used before the current one included the Latin phrase superbia in proelio, meaning pride in battle, and is often still associated with the club. On April 23, 1904, City won the FA Cup 1-0 over Bolton Wanderers. It was the club's first ever major trophy, and the first major trophy won by a club from
Wanderers. Isn't there a Wolverhampton? Wolverhampton Wanderers? I might have just put my foot in my mouth. Alright, anyway, just a question. Just more of like a mental note. Alright, I know you guys are like, and commence the destruction. Alright.
Manchester. Flash forward about 100 years now to the next 2 events I want to discuss. One of the most important days in the club's history actually came off the field. On September 1st, 2008, Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan and his Abu Dhabi United group officially purchased Manchester City. City were acquired only the year prior by former Prime Minister of Thailand, Thaksin Shinawatra. He became embroiled in corruption charges and had his assets frozen, which forced this sale to Sheikh Mansour. The Sheikh's group has since pumped billions of dollars into the club, purchasing players, building infrastructure, and purchasing satellite clubs all over the world to change the way English clubs and global soccer clubs behave. Incredibly, the ownership group has been able to maintain some semblance of the club's core values, which are rooted in the community, even as they've built City into a global empire.
That's wild. Usually when there's a corporate takeover, nothing is left. It's like scorched earth. You don't even recognize the thing they bought anymore. It happens with banks. It happens with any kind of like rebranding, new management changing hands. And I appreciate the fact that they kept it all the same while boosting sales, right? That's what you want. But wow, billions. That's how did everyone feel about that? How did everyone feel about the city's new billions? Anyway, I'm not trying to rile people up. It's going to happen anyway. But these are questions I got to ask because you guys help me know so much information in the comments.
Without this forced sale on September 1st, 2008, likely none of this success would have been possible. And finally, the last event I want to discuss happened on May 13th, 2012. Man City and Man United were tied for first place in the Premier League heading into the last match of the season. City held an 8-goal tiebreaker difference, so simply needed to match United's result on the day. The matches happened at the same time, with Manchester United playing at Sunderland and City hosting Queen's Park Rangers. City entered stoppage time on that day down 2-1, but scored a dramatic header in the 92nd minute through Edin Dzeko. United's match ended with them winning 1-0, and United began celebrating thinking they had won the title. But City miraculously scored a second goal in stoppage time, this one in the 94th minute through Sergio Aguero to win the Premier League. It will likely forever be the most dramatic title conclusion to a Premier League season. And if you haven't seen it, you should watch the video we will link to in
what he's about to link. Should we watch it? Just hearing that history, that game sounds intense. That's one of those games that you don't forget where you were during that match. That must have shut everything down. Oh my god. But let me know. Just be like hashtag react to it in the comments and we'll get to it. All right. That's awesome though. All right. Let's do it.
In the show description underneath this video. The song Blue Moon is the club's anthem sung by supporters. It's a relatively newer tradition, with it reportedly beginning in 1989. The 80s were a time when many English supporters changed from solely using chants to also singing songs during matches. Blue Moon was apparently first sung after City played Liverpool in the opening match of the 1989-1990 season, as the supporters were waiting for the Liverpool home crowd to disperse. It's since become the passionate anthem for City supporters. Another even newer tradition for City fans is the Poznan. In 2010, City were in the same Europa League group as Lech Poznan. When Poznan's fans came to City's home ground, they demonstrated great support, including this strange move where the fans turned their back to the match, put their arms around each other's shoulders, and jumped up and down. City fans were confused at first, but began doing it at their own matches in the weeks after, and they've been doing it ever since. City have had many great players in their storied history, so apologies that we're not going to cover all of them here. Bert Trautmann has a fascinating story, though. He was a German paratrooper captured during World War II and transferred to a prisoner of war camp in Lancashire. After the war, he signed for City somewhat controversially in 1949 and played for the club for 15 years. He famously broke his neck in the 1956 FA Cup final, but continued to play because there were no substitutions allowed at the time. Pretty incredible stuff.
Oh my god, there's so much to unpack with just that dude. Okay. Oh. Okay. Alright. Cool. Good old German paratrooper. Alright.
The next player I want to mention is Colin Bell. He had probably the greatest Man City career prior to the one experienced by the current generation of players. He played with City from 1966 until 1979. He won the first and second division titles, FA Cup, 2 League Cups, and the European Cup Winners' Cup with City during his tenure. There's a stand at the Etihad named after him. Sergio Aguero is City's record goal scorer. He joined the club in 2011 and scored arguably the most dramatic goal in Premier League history to win City the title in the 2011-2012 season, which we've already discussed. He's had a fantastic career and is poised to win many more trophies with the club in the future.
Remember, 5 years old, this video. So, I don't know if what he's prophesying will come to fruition or not, or if it has. Who knows? All right.
Future. Recent or still current players worth mentioning here are also David Silva, Yaya Toure, Vincent Kompany, Kevin De Bruyne, and many others, since the current generation of players is City's most successful in the club's history. Wilf Wild, who besides just having an awesome name, was City's longest ever serving manager from 1932 until 1946. He won the 1934 FA Cup at Wembley. He also won City's first ever league title, leading them on a 22-match unbeaten streak to end the 1936-1937 season as champions. Unfortunately, he also holds a rather dubious record, as City were relegated the following season, the only English team ever to have been relegated as defending champions. Another manager I want to mention here is Pep Guardiola, the current club manager. He is a revolutionary manager and widely regarded as the best manager of his generation. He's credited with inventing the tiki-taka, high-press, possession style of soccer made famous by the dominant FC Barcelona team in the late 2000s. He's taken that style and imposed it on the current Man City squad, who are scoring tons of goals and are on a record-setting pace. Wow. At time of recording, they are still alive to win a treble, having already won the League Cup, look to be winning the Premier League comfortably and are one of the favorites to win the Champions League. And finally, I want to mention Roberto Mancini, who was manager as City won their first league title in 44 years in that 2011-2012 season, and also Manuel Pellegrini, who was the first manager from outside of Europe to manage the team to the English Premier League title, as those two both deserve mention here.
Cool. Rivals.
City's two biggest rivals these days are Manchester United and Liverpool. There was a natural rivalry between the cities of Manchester and Liverpool, which dates back to the 19th century, when the Manchester Ship Canal was built to bypass the city of Liverpool and its control of trade and commerce in the area. The rivalry is more expressed between Manchester United and Liverpool between the cities, but there's definitely some element present in this rivalry. Additionally, with City's recent rise to perennial title contenders, the two have met in some epic clashes in recent years. City also came from behind in the title race to steal the 2013-2014 Premier League title from Liverpool's grasp, which helped intensify this rivalry. Nowadays, Manchester City's manager Pep Guardiola and Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp are two of the most offensive-oriented and widely considered some of the best managers in the world, which makes for exceptionally entertaining matches when these two sides meet. Cool. Now, Manchester United...
So this is a true derby to me. Within the city, within a couple miles, you have your opposition. Like, that's crazy. I would love to be a fly on the wall on one of those games. Granted, I don't think I would come out of those games alive, those matches alive, but it'd be like, that is a derby I understand. I get behind. Like, when you're talking about proximity and within the same, let's say, Premier League, and both are playing top football at the time, they're going to meet a lot and it's going to get heated. And that's entertaining football right there.
It is unquestionably Man City's biggest rival. The two clubs play in the same city, and the two sets of fans haven't exactly always been fond of each other, but things turned violent in the hooligan days of the 1980s. The 1980s also coincided with United's rise to domestic dominance and City really struggling. The fans have maintained hostilities, but the violence has kind of slowed down a bit in the 90s and 2000s. When Sheikh Mansour and his ownership group took over City in 2008, he turned them into overnight title contenders. Wow. The rivalry has taken on a new angle as both clubs compete for players and trophies. Also, City's dramatic 2012 Premier League title that we've already mentioned at the expense of Manchester United has made this into one of the best derbies in all of the Premier League. The stats and records we're about to discuss are as of March 2018, which is when we are recording this video. City have spent 89 seasons in the top flight in their history. The club has 15 major trophies, including 4 First Division or Premier League titles. It's looking like it's going to be a 5th this season. 5 FA Cups, 5 League Cups, including this season's League Cup, and 1 European Cup Winners' Cup. The club's first team record appearance holder is Alan Oakes with 668 appearances. The club's record goal scorer is Sergio Aguero with 199 goals at time of recording. Man City's record transfer purchase was Aymeric Laporte from Athletic Bilbao in Spain on January 30th, 2018 for about £57 million. And the club's record transfer sale was Kelechi Iheanacho to Leicester City on August 3rd, 2017 for about £25 million. And one last interesting fact about Man City, they are the most recent and likely last ever English club to win a European final fielding an all-English team, which they did in the 1970 European Cup Winners' Cup. So, there you have it. A bit of history on Manchester City Football Club.
So before we get into this thing, let me know what you guys think. Granted, with the stipulation, and I feel like I'm saying this a lot, this is just going to be pre-recorded, I'm just going to insert audio. 5 years old. Much changed since then? Has much changed since then? Has the derby intensity changed since then? I think that the derby proximity, the team's proximity to each other, will always prevent that derby from becoming less intense. It's always going to be intense. It's always going to be like, they're our neighbors. Like, we gotta fight and win. Fight and win. Manchester United Football Club up to bat. Cue graphics. Anyway, guys, we're back at it with our good friend Dave from the Soccer Tavern. Should be called the Football Tavern, but Hey, it is what it is. He shares my land here across the pond. So he's going to call it soccer.
Tavern, where we're discussing the history, culture, and philosophy of the beautiful game. My name is Dave, and in this video, we're talking about the history of Manchester United Football Club. Pull up a seat, and let's start the discussion. Manchester United is located in the southwest central part of the city of Manchester. Manchester is located in the northwest part of England in the United Kingdom. The club currently play in the Premier League, and its home ground is called Old Trafford, which opened in 1910 and holds 75,643 people. The club began in 1878 when workers from the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Company formed a soccer club called Newton Heath LYR. Newton Heath was a reference to the neighborhood in the city of Manchester, and LYR was a reference to their company. In 1892, the club was admitted to the Football League and changed its name to simply Newton Heath. The club almost then went bankrupt in 1902 before a local brewery owner, John Henry Davies, saved the club. With his investment, he became chairman of the board and immediately instituted changes to the governing structure of the club. Along with these changes, he felt a name change was necessary to appeal to the greater Manchester population after being inspired by Manchester City's name change only 8 years earlier. The names of Manchester Central and Manchester Celtic were considered before the club settled on their existing name of Manchester United in the spring of 1902. The club has three nicknames: United, the Reds, and the Red Devils. United obviously comes from the club's name. There are many other clubs with United in their official name, but Manchester United are the most successful and famous English club in the world. So chances are...
So kind of like City. If you talk about City, everyone knows who you're talking about. So United, same thing. Got it. Cool. I'm here for it. And Red Devils, I've heard. Reds, I've heard. But the other one, not so much. But anyway, let's go.
That when you hear a person saying United and you're not exactly sure who they're referring to, your best bet is to assume Manchester United. The Reds nickname comes from the club playing in red shirts and white shorts as their main colors since the early part of the 20th century. Pretty straightforward on that one. Yeah. The nickname of Red Devils is slightly more evolved. In the 1950s, a local rugby club called Salford City Reds also wore red and were a dominant squad. The rugby club went on a tour of France and impressed the French journalists so much that it earned the nickname of Les Diables Rouges, which translates to the Red Devils in French. Apologies for the pronunciation there. The club returned to Manchester area with that nickname. By the late 1960s, Manchester United's manager, Sir Matt Busby, thought it would be more intimidating for opponents if the club used Red Devils as a nickname over the nickname of Busby's Babes, which journalists preferred at that time. United have been using the nickname of Red Devils ever since. The current crest shares many similarities to the crest first used in the 1960s, with the main similarity being the crest's shape. The current crest has been used since 1998. Obviously, the words Manchester and United at the top and bottom of the crest come from the club's name. The ship is a reference to the city of Manchester's famous shipping canal and comes from the city's coat of arms. The Red Devil was added in the 1970s after the club adopted the nickname at the insistence of Sir Matt Busby, as we've already discussed. And the two historic soccer balls on either side of the crest are a reference to the sport that the club plays. There are four important events I want to discuss in this section. On February 6, 1958, Manchester United was flying back from a European Cup match against Red Star Belgrade. The plane stopped in Munich to refuel, and after two aborted attempts to take off, the plane crashed on its third attempt. 8 players, 3 staff members, 8 journalists, and 4 others died in the crash.
Oh my God.
It is the darkest day in the club's history. Amazingly, the club's manager, Sir Matt Busby, survived the crash and rebuilt his team over the coming years, which leads us to the second event I want to discuss. On May 29, 1968, Manchester United played Benfica in the European Cup final, now called the Champions League, at Wembley in London. Benfica had already won the competition twice and had one of the greatest players in history, Eusebio, on their roster. After regulation ended 1-1, United was able to score 3 goals in extra time to win the match. Only 10 years after the club had been decimated by the Munich air disaster, and still with Matt Busby as their manager, the Red Devils became the first English club to win the European Cup. The third event I want to discuss happened exactly 31 years later. On May 29, 1999, Manchester United completed the first and so far only treble in English soccer history.
Wow.
For those that may not know, a treble is when a club wins the domestic league, domestic cup competition, and Champions League in the same season. The club had already won the Premier League and FA Cup that season, and on May 29th, the club was playing Bayern Munich in the Champions League final. United were trailing 1-0 heading into stoppage time. Bayern basically had one hand on the trophy, but Teddy Sheringham scored in the 91st minute before Ole Gunnar Solskjaer scored in the 93rd to dramatically win the title for United. It was one of the most dramatic and thrilling conclusions to a Champions League final in history. And finally, the fourth event I want to discuss happened on May 14th, 2011. Manchester United drew Blackburn Rovers 1-1 to win its 19th ever First Division or Premier League title.
Wow, man.
This is special in United's history because it meant the club surpassed their arch rivals Liverpool FC for most top division titles in English soccer history. In 1990, Liverpool held an 18-7 margin in this department, but in only the space of about 20 years, United won 12 titles to pass their nemesis. Though the match wasn't the greatest, the date lives in United folklore as the date the club surpassed Liverpool. Manchester United supporters are famous for singing the song Glory, Glory, Man United. The song was recorded as a tactic to bring players and fans together for the 1983 FA Cup final between United and Brighton and Hove Albion. The song was recorded by Frank Renshaw and was based on the song The Battle Hymn of Republic, which was popular during the American Civil War.
Yeah.
It is a full anthem with lyrics specific to Manchester United and the club's history.
Cool.
It's become one of the most popular club anthems in the world, sung by United fans all over. United has truly had too many great players in their history to get into details on their accomplishments in this section, so I'm just going to rattle off names. George Best, Bobby Charlton, Eric Cantona, Peter Schmeichel, David Beckham, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Roy Keane, Cristiano Ronaldo, Wayne Rooney, and many more, but we just don't have time to get to them here. The club has had two absolutely legendary managers that I want to discuss in this section, Sir Matt Busby and Sir Alex Ferguson. Funny enough,
Before you get to this, right, that's crazy. It's just like the amount of talent that has come through the club, that's just crazy. I know that name, Cristiano Ronaldo, I know that name. But I know, this is 5 years old, guys. This is 5 years old. I keep saying that. It's going to be on like a loop track on all these videos that Dave tells us. You know, when we do a Dave video, it's just 5 years old. I'll put it across the bottom or something. But anyway, guys, yeah, let's keep diving into it. You know, I have to pause and talk because I have to pause and talk. If you know. But this is great. I like this. And let me know if we just got done reacting to the Hillsborough disaster where I not really dove into it. I just figured what it was. And man, it was tragic. And this, I love, it's awful. But for a team to be able to rally behind something awful happening within the club is amazing. Is amazing. And I know that from talking with people within our community, I know that not a lot gets said about, even though the rivalry is strong between City and United, I know that there is still a love shared between the clubs because I know that there was some support sent for Man United from City, if what I'm reading is correct. So anyway, I'm not trying to open a can of worms. I'm just telling you what I've been told. And I think that we're going to dive down what happened, that the plane crash. I think after this video, I'll sit and I'll try to get that one out too. But it's crazy. The stories that come from behind a tragedy, man, it makes me loyal. It makes me appreciate the club. It makes me appreciate the team even more. So, and the fans. This, if anything, that this journey is teaching me, right, is that football is the fans' sport. It's a sport for the fans. Okay, that is such a unique concept for us over here across the pond. Because over here, the NFL, American football, league. It's just millionaires becoming millionaires. Billionaires paying millionaires, right? So, anyway, thanks, guys.
During Sir Matt's playing career, he never played for United, but he did play for United's now two biggest rivals of Man City and Liverpool. United fans absolutely forgive him for this, as he became manager in 1949. He greatly expanded the club's scouting system and made a serious commitment to developing young players. That earned his team the nickname of Busby's Babes due to the first team's average age. He led the club to 5 First Division titles, 2 FA Cups, and 1 European Cup. He survived the plane crash in Munich that we've already discussed and rebuilt the club within 5 years of that tragic event to be competing at the highest levels again. Truly outstanding. He retired at the 1968-1969 season as United's greatest manager up to that point in their history and is immortalized outside of Old Trafford with a bronze statue. About 20 years later, Sir Alex Ferguson took over as Manchester United manager in 1986. Over the next 27 years, he led the club to over 30 domestic and international trophies, including 13 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups, 2 Champions League titles, and the first ever treble in English soccer history in the 1998-1999 season. Sir Alex is United's most successful manager of all time. With United being the most successful club in England, the club naturally has many rivals. Liverpool, Manchester City, Arsenal, and Chelsea are the 4 rivals I want to discuss here. We've already discussed these rivalries in our club history videos for each of those clubs, but in case you haven't seen those videos, I'm going to recap them here. The Liverpool rivalry comes from a natural rivalry between the cities of Manchester and Liverpool. The rivalry dates back to the building of the Manchester Ship Canal in the 19th century. From a soccer perspective, Liverpool became the dominant English team in the 1970s and 1980s. When Manchester United hired Sir Alex Ferguson and he started to build a squad that repeatedly won trophies, Liverpool was the natural target considering they had the most major trophies of any English club. The combination between the two cities and the two most successful clubs from those cities, that made this into the fiercest rivalry in all of England today. Manchester City is Manchester United's second biggest rival. The two clubs play in the same city, and the rivalry became violent in the hooligan days of the 1980s. The 80s also coincided.
That's been touched on multiple times, like in the city video and this, and I know you guys have told me a bunch about the rivalries. Like I know that it's not just it's like within the city itself. You have it split. It's a geographical derby. So. Yeah, I'm slowly getting it. I'm slowly understanding this pent up aggression, that you guys get for the derbies. Like I understand, like your proximity is so close. Nothing like here where you're hours away from seeing the next fan base of another team. So yeah, it's crazy, man.
With United's rise to domestic dominance while City really struggled. The rivalry has settled down a bit from a violence perspective, but the two clubs and fans definitely are still rivals. It's been helped that when City got new owners in 2008, they turned into overnight title contenders. The rivalry has taken on a new angle as both clubs compete for the best players and trophies. Also, City's dramatic 2012 Premier League title at the expense of Manchester United has helped make this a big rivalry today. Manchester United and Arsenal each have a glorious history in English soccer, but it was always one or the other doing well. Then Arsene Wenger joined Arsenal as manager in 1996 and built the club into title challengers. Manchester United were the dominant squad at the time, and the clubs had some epic battles. Roy Keane, Manchester United's combative center midfielder, and Patrick Vieira, Arsenal's own combative center midfielder, were the leaders in these battles. Wow. In the late 90s and early 2000s, this was the fiercest rivalry in all of the Premier League. Nowadays, Manchester United manager Jose Mourinho and Arsenal manager, who's still Arsene Wenger, seem to have their own rivalry. That helps keep this going, even as United has some more intense rivals with Liverpool and Man City. Lastly, Chelsea is considered a rival for much of the same reason as Manchester City has become more of a rival in recent years. Chelsea got a new owner in 2003, and he's built them into title contenders who are now legitimate competitors with United. The rivalry has been helped by incredible managers on both sides over the last 2 decades or so. The rivalry doesn't feel quite as heated as the rivalry with the other 3 clubs we talked about, but Chelsea and United are definitely rivals. The stats and records we're about to discuss are as of March 2018, which is when we are recording this video. United have spent 93 seasons in the top flight in their history. The club has 44 major trophies, including 20 First Division or Premier League titles, 12 FA Cups, 5 League Cups, 3 Champions Leagues or European Cups, 1 Europa League, 1 Cup Winners' Cup, 1 Club World Cup, and 1 Intercontinental World Cup, which was the predecessor to the Club World Cup. The club's record first-team appearance holder is Ryan Giggs with 963 appearances. That's a lot of appearances. The club's record goal scorer is Wayne Rooney with 253 goals. United's clean sheet record holder is Peter Schmeichel with 180 clean sheets. The Red Devils...
In the comments, please help me out. What is a clean sheet? Please help me out. That one, and I keep forgetting to ask because Dave tends to move pretty fast through things. Clean sheets. Please explain it to me. I understand he's not talking about betting, like not sheets or quilts or anything like that. He is talking about something relating to football, obviously. Please let me know what that means. I do not know. And I heard that pop up once or twice in the World Cup coverage that we did. So that is just a question. I need to be inquisitive in these videos. So you guys help me know so much so far. I need to know a little bit more. I need to know a lot of it more, right? But what is a clean sheet? Please let me know. Thanks.
Devils' record transfer purchase was Paul Pogba from Juventus in Italy on August 8th, 2016 for about £89 million. I also wanted to note here that the club brought Romelu Lukaku from Everton FC on July 10th, 2017 for an initial fee of £75 million plus a potential £15 million more in add-ons. So Lukaku could end up being more expensive than Pogba, but we won't know until the future. And the club's record transfer sale was Cristiano Ronaldo to Real Madrid on July 1st, 2009 for about £80 million. And one last interesting fact about Manchester United: since October 30th, 1937, that's over 80 years, Manchester United have had at least one graduate from their youth academy in their match day 18 for every match. Wow. That's almost 3,900 straight matches at time of recording. Truly incredible stuff.
Wow. I love what he did. And he helps me. I'm on his trail. This is awesome. For someone who doesn't really know too much about the sport but understands the intensity and the history, I'm getting the history behind the sport. This is great. Thank you guys for sticking with me through this long journey. We are checking out Newcastle United FC. This is the club history. Cue graphics. All right. Well, I know absolutely nothing about Newcastle. Hopefully this will enlighten me. This is one of the lesser known names for me. Because over on Embrace the Suck 21, we get a bunch of comments. You'll always have someone comment Everton, Liverpool, Man City, Man United, Leeds, all those clubs. Newcastle, not so much. And nothing against their fan base. But let's dive in. I'm very interested to see their history. This comes from our good friend Dave at the Soccer Tavern. I'll get it right. You guys will hear.
Welcome to the Soccer Tavern, where we're discussing the history, culture, and philosophy of the beautiful game. My name is Dave, and in this video, we're talking about the history of Newcastle United Football Club. Pull up a seat, and let's start the discussion. Newcastle United is located in the central part of the city of Newcastle upon Tyne. Newcastle upon Tyne is located in the far northeastern part of England in the United Kingdom. The club currently play in the Premier League, and its home ground is called St. James's Park, which holds a little more than 52,000 people. Newcastle have been at St. James's Park since 1892, but soccer has been played on the land where St. James's Park is located since 1880.
Ooh.
Newcastle in its current iteration was founded in 1892, but the club has ties that go back to the 1880s. Okay. In the early 1880s, 2 of a handful of soccer clubs playing in the Newcastle area were named Newcastle East End and Newcastle West End, respectively. By 1884, both clubs had become the strongest sides in the area. By the 1891-92 season, West End were struggling financially. In May of 1892, East End took over the lease for West End Stadium, which was St. James's Park, and some of West End's assets, including players, which effectively meant that the two clubs merged. East End kept their name for a few months, but on December 9th, 1892, at a meeting of the club's directors in the Bath Lane Hall, the club voted to change the name to Newcastle United in a bid to attract support from the whole city. The legal name of the club didn't formally change until 1895, but 1892 is seen as the club's founding.
So check that out. Like that must be a massive moment. Like, okay, because I've learned how much football means to everyone across the pond and really globally, let's just be honest. Just not here. Just not here. Okay. That must be a massive undertaking, okay? You take two clubs within the city that probably, they play each other, that's a big derby, right? Then you merge them together, sharing the squad, right? Bring part of the squad from the dissolved club into the new club or the old club, right? So with the fan base already, we rooted against these guys, and now they're part of the club, so now they're part of the family. I want to know how easy of a transition is that? It must sort of shake the foundations of your fandom, right? Because if these clubs are religion, then your religion crumbled and got dissolved and merged to another. I want to know, because I guess there's some of that over here on this side of the pond with NFL teams moving cities. But anyway, this is something where I want to know how that is. That decision is massive. So anyway, let's just dive into it. I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm asking is could that happen seamlessly now? Because apparently it happened pretty easily then. At least that's what Dave is leading me to believe. The case could be contrary to that. And I just don't think anyone is with us still from 1892. You know, maybe there is somewhere. I just doubt that. All right, here we go.
Founding date. The club has three nicknames: United, the Magpies, and Toon. The United nickname clearly comes from the club's official name. Okay. The Magpies nickname comes from the club's colors. Newcastle have played in black and white striped shirts since 1894. Magpies are small black and white colored birds that are very common in the UK. Newcastle playing in kits that resembled these birds led to the nickname of Magpies. Okay. Finally, the Toon nickname comes from the local pronunciation of the word town, as people in Newcastle, also called Geordies, speak their own dialect. Even though Newcastle United doesn't have the word town in its club name, this different pronunciation of the word has become so synonymous with the city of Newcastle that it's been extended to apply to the city's only prominent soccer club, Newcastle United. Most interestingly, research has shown that the Geordie pronunciation of the word town, so Toon, is actually the original pronunciation of the word. The Toon pronunciation dates back to 500 AD, before the Great Vowel Shift, which apparently is a real thing that happened in the middle of the last millennium, changed the pronunciation of lots of words, including the...
Where were you guys? Where were all of you when the Great Vowel Shift happened? It was felt across the globe. I love that. We're learning. 500 AD, the Great Vowel Shift. Kind of like Pangea and the dinosaurs. What? I love that though. Okay. Didn't know there was such a thing as the Great Vowel Shift. Oh man. All right. Toon. All right.
The pronunciation of town. The club's current crest, which has been used since 1988, takes many of its elements from the coat of arms for the city of Newcastle upon Tyne. The castle at the top of the crest is derived from a new castle that was built in 1080 AD by Robert Courthose. That's also where the name of the city comes from. Coming out of the top of the castle is a lion that guards the castle and holds a flagstaff with a modified version of the St. George's pennon flying. Okay. The mythical seahorses on either side of the crest are a reference to Newcastle being a seaport town. The shield comes directly from the coat of arms, and the black and white stripes on the shield come from Newcastle United's iconic colors. Lastly, the scroll with Newcastle United at the bottom is obviously the name of the club.
Got it.
I wanted to talk about 5 events in this section.
5.
First up, on May 7th, 1955, Newcastle United beat Manchester City 3-1 in the FA Cup final. The club had also won the 1951 and 1952 FA Cups, so this third FA Cup in 5 years earned the club the nickname of the Cup Kings at that time. The next event I'd like to mention happened about 15 years later. Newcastle finished 10th in the first division in the 67-68 season, but qualified for the next season's Inter-Cities Fairs Cup through a weird quirk in the rules. The Inter-Cities Fairs Cup was the predecessor to the UEFA Cup, now known as the Europa League. It was the club's first time competing in Europe, and they were 1,000 to 1 odds to win the tournament. Improbably, they made the 1969 Inter-Cities Fairs Cup final, where they played Újpest Dózsa from Hungary. Újpest were overwhelming favorites in the final as well, but Newcastle won both legs to seal a 6-2 aggregate victory. They raised their first and so far only European trophy on June 11th, 1969. The third event I want to discuss came at the end of the 1991-92 season. Newcastle was in danger of being relegated to the third division for the first time in the club's history. The club was in a bit of financial trouble at that time too, so it's not clear if the club could have survived relegation to the third tier. On May 2nd, 1992, the club played Leicester City in their final match. Newcastle was out of the relegation zone, but could still be caught by 3 other clubs behind them in the table, so they needed to win their match. After going 1-0 up, the club surrendered an 89th minute equalizing goal to put the fate of the club out of its own hands. Only 1 minute later, though, Newcastle forced an own goal from Leicester, which sent the team and traveling fans into delirium, as it meant the club was safe.
Wow.
I also wanted to quickly mention 2 other events here. On April 3rd, 1996, Newcastle lost heartbreakingly to Liverpool 4-3 in one of the greatest matches in Premier League history. Newcastle were chasing the Premier League.
Okay. So, hear me out. Hear me out, guys. It gets thrown out a lot. There's a lot of greatest games in Premier League history because that's opinionated, correct? In this video, okay, and we'll only make this is the video, all right? Everyone, put the best matches to check out, and I will try to find highlights of those matches, and we'll watch them together on the channel. Let's do it like that. All right, Newcastle United FC video, comment section, best matches. Let's do this. Because every video Dave is on, okay, it's one of the best matches in Premier League history. And it's like, dude, we're all the way down to Newcastle United. Every video's had the best match in Premier League history. So, let me know what truly is the greatest. All right, in your opinion. I'll write them down. As long as there's no overlapping ones, we'll check it out. We'll check it out because I feel like that is the next step. Let's get to not just the histories, but let's see how some of the stuff plays out. Let me see some of the plays and the players and the times, and let's do it. Enough talk. Back to it.
Title that season, and this heartbreaking result more or less sealed their fate as not winning the title that year. And the final discuss happened on February 5th, 2011. Newcastle trailed Arsenal 4-0 after only 26 minutes into the match, but the Toons scored 4 goals in the final 21 minutes of the match to pull off one of the greatest comebacks in Premier League history. People from Newcastle are known as Geordies, dating back to the city's support of King George during a rebellion in the 1740s. With Newcastle United being pretty much the only major club in town, Newcastle fans are referred to as Geordies. Geordies have their own dialect and a strong accent that can sometimes be difficult for people to understand. I can attest to this as my high school soccer coach was from Newcastle and was often difficult to understand. Another nickname for supporters is the Toon Army, which is a reference to the club's nickname of Toon. I'd like to discuss 3 players in this.
Out of all the nicknames. All right. Shout out to you guys for bringing back Toon, which is the correct way to say town. But Toon Army, that's crazy. I know it's history based, but every time I hear Toon, I think of cartoon. That's just me. All right. But Toon Army is like a Space Jam thing. It goes on in my head. and it shouldn't go into my head to an army. But all right, had to get that out there. Let's just have fun with it.
Section. Paul Gascoigne, nicknamed Gaza, joined Newcastle as a youth player at 16 years old and signed for the first team in 1985. He won the Young Player of the Year award from the Premier League in 1988 and joined Tottenham for a then British transfer record fee that year. He was an incredibly talented player who wore his heart on his sleeve every time he played. His life off the field was tumultuous, but he was incredibly talented on the pitch. Even though his time with Newcastle was brief, he's still regarded as one of the most talented players in the club's history. Peter Beardsley was nicknamed Pedro and played attacking midfield for Newcastle. He scored 119 goals in 2 different spells with the club and had tons of assists as well. Alan Shearer is the greatest striker in Premier League history, scoring a record 260 goals in the league. He's originally from Newcastle but didn't join the club until 1996, 8 years into his professional career. Although he didn't win a trophy with Newcastle, he scored a club record 206 goals in 405 appearances. He was regarded as one of the best strikers in the world during his playing career.
Wow.
I want to highlight 4 managers in this section. Stan Seymour managed Newcastle in 3 separate stints and is one of the most influential people in the club's history. Seymour played, managed, and was in the boardroom for the club. He actually played on the last Newcastle United team that won the First Division title and was the first person in English soccer history to win the FA Cup as a player and as a manager. Seymour led the club to 2 FA Cups as a manager and was instrumental in the boardroom for helping the club win a 3rd FA Cup in the 1950s. Next, Joe Harvey was similar to Stan Seymour as he was a former player that led the club to trophies. He took over in 1962 and led the club until 1975.
Another thing I've noticed, and I love this, is that the old players would come back to coach. That's a different level of dedication. I love that. I think it just adds so much more layering to why. Like, even though they may not be playing, they're still on the pitch. And that's like that's a true sportsman. You know, like, okay, I may not be playing, but I can coach. And where am I going to coach? My home. That's awesome. That is awesome. You know, and you don't see that kind of loyalty. And that's the one thing out of all this journey that I'm seeing is just loyalty amongst players, amongst clubs, amongst coaches, amongst cities, areas, fans, loyalty. Number 1. That I respect and I applaud across the board.
5. Harvey managed the club to their only European title and has the most wins as a manager in club history. Kevin Keegan took over as manager for the 1991-1992 season that we already talked about and saved the club from relegation. Keegan led the club to promotion to the Premier League, and the club's exciting attacking style of play earned them the nickname of the Entertainers. Keegan nearly won the Premier League in 1995-1996, and he is regarded as one of the best managers in club history. He left the club in January of 1997, but returned for a short second stint with the club in 2008. That only lasted about half a year, but King Kev still has a fond place in Newcastle fans' hearts. And finally, Sir Bobby Robson was born and raised in the Newcastle area. He went on to a legendary playing and managing career all over Europe.
Yeah.
Robson won domestic league titles and cups as well as European titles, in addition to managing the English national team at 2 World Cups. Wow. Robson managed Newcastle at the end of his career, managing from 1999 until 2004. Though the club didn't win any trophies during his tenure, they did qualify for the Champions League a handful of times, and it was the club's most successful period since Kevin Keegan left in the mid-1990s.
All right. Rivals. I can't wait. I love this part. I wait 10 minutes just to get to this part.
Newcastle United's biggest rival is Sunderland AFC. The 2 cities are only 12 miles apart and have been in conflict for over 300 years, well before the modern version of soccer was created. The conflict actually starts when the trading of coal was awarded to Newcastle traders only by the king, which left Sunderland traders in a terrible spot. The 2 cities have been at odds ever since this. The soccer clubs first played each other in 1888 and have played each other over 150 times. When the two clubs meet, the matches are called the Tyne and Wear Derby. Matches are really intense affairs with hooliganism and violence by fans common, though modern technologies have helped quell this a bit. Newcastle's second biggest rival is Middlesbrough Football Club. The rivalry is nowhere near as intense as the Sunderland rivalry, though. The cities of Newcastle and Middlesbrough are 42 miles apart, so although they are regional rivals, fans aren't encountering each other on a daily basis quite as much as the Sunderland rivalry. The clubs have met in meaningful matches over the years, but the rivalry doesn't seem to be much more than simply not liking your neighbors. Newcastle also tends to dominate media coverage in the area, which can bother some Borough fans and help fuel this rivalry.
Okay, we understand that what Dave is telling us is dated like 5 years, right? Let me just do a quick Google. We're running down rivals. I just didn't know. Let me know, guys, in the comments of this as well. Let me know what is the story behind Newcastle since 5 years ago, because this is 5 years old. So let's keep going.
The stats and records we're about to discuss are as of March 2018, which is when we are recording this video. United have spent 86 seasons in the top flight in their history. The club has 11 major trophies, including 6 FA Cups, 4 First Division titles, and 1 Inter-Cities Fairs Cup, which again was the predecessor to the UEFA Cup or Europa League. The club's record first-team appearance holder is Jimmy Lawrence, with 496 appearances. The club's record goal scorer is Alan Shearer with 206 goals. The Magpies' record transfer purchase was Michael Owen from Real Madrid in Spain on August 24, 2006 for about £16 million, and the club's record transfer sale was Andy Carroll to Liverpool FC in January of 2011 for about £35 million. Wow, and one last interesting fact about the club, Newcastle United jointly hold the record for the biggest scoreline in English Football League history. The club beat Newport County 13-0 on October 15, 1946 in the second division to set that record. 13. So, there you have it. A bit of history on Newcastle United Football Club.
No, Dave. Thank you, bud. Newcastle United Football Club. Club history. 5 years old. There's a lot of holes I think we have to fill together. Were Newcastle not in the Premier League at the time of this recording? And what's changed since 5 years ago? So it's funny. You talk about the club's history. That doesn't really have anything to do with the now. When Dave gets into like stats and records and notable players and stuff like that, and rivalries can pop up overnight almost. I feel like if it's not a geographical rival, then yeah, derbies I feel like can pop up. They can form within 5 years pretty well. So, let me know if that is the case with Newcastle United. We have Nottingham Forest. 1R. I'm learning Forest, Forest. Got it. Couldn't find one of those brief history videos from our good friend Dave at the Soccer Pub Tavern Place thing. So, I clicked on the next video. I typed in history of Nottingham Forest, and this popped up. It's the rise, fall, and rise again of Nottingham Forest. Oh, wait. Cue graphics.
100 years. But there's one side that stands above the rest as the oldest of them all. Nottingham Forest. In a city over 25 times smaller than the capital London, the Garibaldi alone have outshone the entire city's footballing achievements on multiple occasions. But having summited the mountain of world football in the late 70s, the fortunes of a club from the banks of the River Trent plummeted. For years, the hopes and dreams of Forest fans were shattered in front of their eyes, as the red shirts of the club went from signifying danger for the opposition to the bleeding out of a dying institution. Following campaign after campaign of mania and false dawns, Nottingham Forest found themselves bottom of the championship with just 1 point from the opening 7 and destined for the start of their third spell of third division football. But then, a man born in South Wales, who just left Swansea City in explosive fashion a few months previously, was brought into the club. 8 months later, and Nottingham Forest were a Premier League side once again. However, it wouldn't be a fairy tale return for the English footballing giants though, as after 11 games and just 1 win, they found themselves planted to the foot of the table. But then, Steve Cooper did it again. This is the story of how Nottingham Forest rose up, fell down, and then rose up once again. the 6th of January 1975. Elton John topped the Billboard Top 100. Football had entered the 9th year since England were champions of the world, and Stoke City were going neck and neck with Liverpool at the top of the First Division, in a title race that would result in then 5th place Derby County winning the league. But most importantly of all, Brian Clough joined Nottingham Forest, with the club finding themselves 13th place in the 2nd Division, just weeks after he'd left Leeds United, the reigning champions of the first tier. Forest would win their first game under Clough, before drawing 2-2 with the biggest team in world football, Leyton Orient. You'll never guess who I support. This draw would start an 11-game spell without a win, the side's worst run of the season, as the choice of second Alan Brown looked more and more risky as each game went by. But under the surface, something was brewing at the City ground. Clough was starting to instill his ideologies within his players, as the side finished the season with the 3rd best form in the league, managing a 16th place finish, followed by an 8th place one a year later. Fast forward another year to the 27th of April 1977, and Nottingham Forest had lost 2 games on a bounce, dropping down to 4th and out of the promotion spots, which they'd featured in for pretty much the entire year. With just 4 games left to save their season, Forest gave it everything. And in the end, 3 wins and a draw were enough to see them scrape into 3rd place, and therefore the First Division, by just 1 point. Going into the new campaign, many outside Nottingham were sceptical of this Forest side, but Clough and his assistant Peter Taylor believed in themselves and the squad. It took just 2 games for Forest to reach the top of the league, and from the 4th of October onwards, they wouldn't be knocked off their perch for the rest of the season, winning the title the first time of asking, and going unbeaten from the 20th of November onwards. Of course, with this victory came qualification for the European Cup. However, following this success was arguably the most important sale in the club's history. Having been top scorer in both of Forest's 2 successful seasons, Peter White fell out with boss Brian Clough, and so come August 1978 was sold to Newcastle for £200,000. This loss of their top scorer hindered Forest massively, scoring just 1 goal from their opening 4 games and drawing 6 of their opening 7 for their first ever European Cup game, where they'd faced none other than the reigning champions Liverpool. The Scousers were top of the league and favourites for the competition, so going into the tie the media had pretty much written off Forest completely. Yet within 87 minutes of the first leg, the Garibaldi were 2-0 up, an aggregate lead they would see all the way through until full time at Anfield 2 weeks later, as Forest became the first side to knock Liverpool out of the competition in 3 years.
Wow.
In the second round, they went on to beat AEK Athens 7-2 on aggregate, where there'd then be a 5-month gap before their next European game against Grasshopper Zurich, who they'd beat 5-2 across 2 legs to reach the semis. In said semis, they'd be hosting Cologne of Germany first, coming back from 2-0 down to lead 3-2, before conceding an equaliser in the last minutes of the game, meaning it was all tied up heading into Germany on the 25th of April. After a battle over the 90 minutes in Cologne, Nottingham Forest won 1-0 thanks to an Ian Bowyer goal as they booked their ticket for the final. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned throughout all of this is that in February, Nottingham Forest had finally brought in their man up top to replace Wife who'd left in the summer, and so becoming the most expensive player of all time and the first £1 million player ever. Trevor Francis joined Nottingham Forest from Birmingham City, however hadn't scored a single goal in their European Cup run, due to the fact for the large majority of it, UEFA had deemed him ineligible to play as he was a mid-season transfer. I guess it was written in the stars then for the first £1 million player to score the first and only goal in Nottingham Forest's first ever European Cup final, and over 110 years since being founded, Forest lifted their biggest accomplishment yet, as they were crowned champions of Europe. A year later, they'd made the final again, this time at the legendary Santiago Bernabeu, against more prestigious European opponents Hamburg, who'd been crowned champions of Germany various times over the years, as well as winning the Cup Winners' Cup just a few years previously. It may have been different opposition, in a different stadium, in a different year, but for Forest, the outcome stayed the same, winning 1-0 and therefore retaining their European glory. However, this European glory had plastered over injuries with this Forest side, which proved to be the start of their decline, pretty much straight after reaching the top. Following their second place finish in '79, Forest would drop down to 5th in 1980, until relied on their European Cup triumph to qualify the next season, where they'd then be knocked out in the first round. Within just a couple years, many stars of this side had left, and Peter Taylor retired as assistant manager, leading to many questioning how capable Clough would be in succeeding without his right-hand man. Well, despite never reaching the level of glory that he had with Taylor beside him, Clough would still guide the side to another few top 3 finishes in the league, as well as twice more winning the League Cup, with Forest consistently reaching top half finishes for pretty much his entire time at the club. And so going into the first Premier League season ever, Forest were an outside tip for making Europe. However, after some poor transfer business and Clough's worsening health, it became obvious fairly quickly that Europe wouldn't be a possibility. Forest lost 6 of their 7 opening games and won just 3 up until 1993, where despite a bit of hype with an upturn in form, they fell back into the bad habit of losing, and come the 1st of May 1993, with an entire game left to play, Nottingham Forest became the first side ever relegated from the Premier League. Clough was in tears after the game, with a loss 1-0 later to Ipswich being his final ever match as manager, retiring at the end of his worst season ever. Having joined the club in the second division 18 years earlier, Brian Clough achieved it all with Forest, becoming to this day the greatest manager to ever grace the city. Funny enough, Frank Clark, one of Clough's first signings for Forest, then took over as manager, dragging them back up to the Premier League at the first attempt, before a good start to the season had them top the table after 4 games, with the club going on to finish third and qualifying for the UEFA Cup. However, this campaign was a false sense of hope for the Forest faithful, as the next season they'd been knocked out early in Europe, finished 8th, and watch on as the following campaign they found themselves in the relegation zone after 10 games, and would yet again finish bottom, dropping down to the Championship. And now, you're not going to believe this. Forest did another yo-yo, being promoted instantly once again, and then you get it, being relegated in 1999 in a third bottom place finish since 1993. But this time, Forest wouldn't come back up. An uninspiring run of 4 mid-table finishes from 5 seasons came to a close in 2004-05, where Nottingham Forest were relegated to League One. A 7th place finish in their first campaign prevented the rot, before a 4th place finish and playoff run came in 2006-07. The Garibaldi beat Yeovil 2-0 away in the first leg and were cruising through to Wembley, before a remarkable collapse at the City Ground saw them concede 5 goals in 120 minutes of football, being knocked out after extra time, with Forest fans in disbelief. It would then be a bumpy start to the season in 07-08, with no wins from the opening 4 games. However, once they hit form in September, they didn't stop winning, closing out the season with 6 wins from 7 and secured promotion in 2nd place. They managed to stay up in 19th in 2009 before building over the summer, and found themselves in 2nd place going into 2010, with the promised land of the Premier League in touching distance, having been in the...
Alright, so it's kind of going real fast for me, but and it's not the accent, it's just there's a lot. Holy crap, you guys are up and down and up and down and up and down. Your fan base is loyal as crap to tolerate that. That's you rock out the Championship League and you're like, hell yeah, we're ready for the Premier League, and then you get relegated again. You're like, well, shit, and so you gotta rock out the Championship League again to get to the Premier. It's just back and forth, and man, your fan base, ooh, man, that's going through it, because I think this is probably the most frequent what do you call it, yo-yoing between the leagues, and some yo-yos went far down, but at least they went back up. And that's something I love about your sport, is that there are the Premier League isn't set in stone, and I like that there is relegation, because I think over here we need to implement something like that. If you don't make the top whatevers, bye, and then you work your way up to get it. Make sure you stay hungry. Make sure you stay performing at the top of your abilities. But this is crazy though. I don't think this is the first team, I think, in our history deep dive that goes so many times so quickly. All right. So anyway, let's get back into it. But no, I like that he's doing one hell of a job. One, speaking this fast with all this information and coming through pretty clearly. Like, this is different. This is not our good friend Dave. So, all right.
The deep dark pit of the EFL for over a decade. Their form would drop off in the second half of the season though, but were still able to manage a 3rd place finish and found themselves just 1 playoff campaign away from reaching the top tier. But after conceding 3 goals in 7 minutes in the second leg, overturning what had been a Forest comeback at the City Ground, they were defeated by Blackpool twice, losing 6-4 in aggregate. Despite the heartbreak though, manager Billy Davies chose to stay over the summer, giving them foundations to work on for the next campaign, with another playoff place finish resulting in back-to-back semi-final losses to the side that would go on to be promoted, losing to Swansea 3-1, with the Garibaldi looking like a cursed side. Throughout this period, Forest fan Nigel Doughty owned the club and was their chairman up until October 2011, where he stepped down following backlash from fans as the club failed to recover from losing Davies over the summer, finding themselves in 21st in the league. In spite of this disappointing campaign, Doughty had been a solid figure at the club for years, which offered them stability and helped them to recover from serious financial issues they faced in the 90s, which is why it would be a complete shock in February 2012 when tragically Doughty passed away, aged just 54.
Wow.
Forest then managed to claw themselves out of the relegation zone come the end of the season, finishing 19th and setting themselves up for a successful campaign. As the next season the club flirted with the playoffs all the way through to December, when Famaz Al-Hassawi, who'd bought the club over the summer, took over as chairman, and decided to sack manager O'Driscoll on Christmas Day, with the club's CEO intervening and refusing to allow it to happen until Boxing Day, just hours after the club saw victory against Leeds. This would be the start of an absolute manager merry-go-round at Nottingham Forest. By the end of the season, 4 managers had come and gone, with Billy Davies being brought back in March, managing to make it nearly an entire year in charge, before, you guessed it, got sacked again. By the end of the 2016-17 season, 9 managers had been at Forest in just 4 years under Famaz, with the club seeing worse league finishes year after year. And then finally on the 18th of May 2017, with the side having secured safety on the final day of the season with a 3-0 win against Ipswich, Famaz sold the club to Greek businessman Evangelos Marinakis, who turned out to be just as bonkers with managers. In fact, from 1993 all the way through to the conclusion of the 2018-19 season, Forest pretty much had a manager a season. There'd be 31 changes of managers in 26 years at the City ground, before the most bonkers appointment of all took place, in Sabri Lamouchi. Lamouchi brought 21 players in over the summer, and many Forest fans were sceptical as to what was about to happen, as they'd finally built up to a strong 9th place finish the season before. 11 games in, and Forest was second, as the fans fell in love with the team and staff. The likes of Lamouchi, Samba and Joe Lolly had become fan favourites, and with the owner willing to splash the cash, for the first time in years, it felt like they might just be on their way back to the Premier League. And despite a severe drop in form after the pandemic and loss of fans in the stadium, going into the final day, Forest were in a hugely strong position, in which all they needed was 1 point, or to lose and see a swing of just 5 goals or less in order to reach the playoffs. And in something you couldn't write yourself, 2 last-minute goals in both games affecting Forest went against the Garibaldi, with Nuno da Costa's last moment in a Forest shirt being an own goal to knock them down to 7. Lamouchi's time in Nottingham would never recover from this setback, and after being backed with another 24 signings, they lost their opening 4 matches to the season, and the manager was dismissed. Replacing him would be the experienced Chris Hughton, who'd already got both Newcastle and Brighton promoted out of the division, and so hopes were high for fans of the Garibaldi that he may have what it takes to bring them up. However, Hughton's Forest never really got going, and after never winning more than 2 games in a row, they finished in an underwhelming 17th place before an absolutely atrocious start to the next season. 7 games, 6 losses, 12 goals conceded, and rooted to the bottom of the table. This was Forest's worst start to a season ever. And so, as I mentioned earlier, Steve Cooper came in. From the second the Welshman joined the club, it felt like he matched just what the side stood for, and was exactly what they needed. He managed to turn their season round, qualified them for the playoffs, and after getting the most out of youngsters like Jed Spence and Brendan Johnson, he'd guided them to a 2-1 lead over Sheffield United going into the return fixture in the playoff semi-final. 19 minutes in, and Brendan Johnson scored again for Forest, putting them 3-1 up on aggregate, and securing their place in the playoff final. Nah, I'm lying. This is Forest we're talking about. Following half-time, the event exploded. Gibbs White equalised on the night just after the break, and Fleck sent the game to extra time after a late goal for the Blades, where following a tense but goalless 30 minutes, the clash went to pens. With a score 3-2 to the Garibaldi, Joe Lolly stepped up with the opportunity to put Nottingham Forest just 90 minutes away from the Premier League, but then he blazed his shot over the bar. And just when you thought you'd seen it all, Bryce Samba, in what might have been his final game for the club, saved Morgan Gibbs White's penalty, with the keeper being the hero on the night for the Garibaldi, as they went one huge step closer to returning to the promised land. Over 80,000 people lined Wembley Way, as on the 29th of May, Huddersfield faced up against Nottingham Forest for a place in the Premier League. And you know how this story goes. Nottingham Forest won 1-0, and in just 8 months at the club, Steve Cooper healed the pain which had been deeply rooted in the fans of the club spanning 4 different decades. And by now, you know the drill. 26 new faces entered the City ground, with many pundits saying it's a recipe for disaster. But I don't think many of their fans would have cared about what anyone else thought, as they were back. A loss to Newcastle on the opening day would quickly be forgotten about, as the City ground hosted Premier League football for the first time this millennium, and Forest saw a 1-0 triumph, but it wouldn't be long before things started to go downhill. Going into the 22nd of October, Forest hadn't won a single game in any competition since late August, and faced up against the most successful side in English history, in Liverpool. However, if we rewind all those years to Brian Clough's tenure at the club, and Forest were a real bogey team for the Scouse Reds, and with the spirit of their former manager throwing through the stadium that day, the Garibaldi did the impossible and beat Liverpool. A couple weeks later, and they'd also beat Spurs in the League Cup, followed up by a win against Crystal Palace going into the World Cup, with the club breaking free from the bottom of the Premier League after seemingly being destined for their 4th straight finish there in the Prem. And since the start of the new year, Forest have been nothing short of sensational. A draw against Chelsea, followed up by 2 wins against Southampton and Leicester, has seen Forest rise all the way up to 13th in the table, with the signings finally starting to gel and Steve Cooper working his magic. Not only this, but they once again saw success on penalties, this time in the Carabao Cup, where they've reached the semi-finals, coming up against Manchester United. And with the start to the season having almost resembled Clough's start to life in Nottingham, the side in Garibaldi red might just be destined to lift the trophy he'd won more than any other.
Wow. Oh my god. Oh my god, dude. All right. Well, let's talk about it. That is possibly the craziest. That's the craziest team as far as relegation, recuperation, bouncing back, yo-yoing is the perfect analogy for that. Dude. Oh my god. Fan bases. You guys are next level. God, man. That's Nottingham Forest. Hey, salute to you guys. That's one hell of a journey. It's not even over, but that's one hell of a journey. Way to go. Stick it out, man. That's dang. God. We got Southampton, and that's how I'm going to say it. Football club history. We got our good friend Dave, all right, on the channel. Let's do this thing. I'm excited. I'm excited to see where we go with this. Learning stuff, getting a better understanding of where the football clubs are coming from is huge. This is what this journey is all about. Is figuring out, and yeah, I do have my glasses on today. Will it make me smarter? Who knows? Cue graphics. Yes. Let's do it. How do I? All right. I'm obviously a pro at this.
Welcome to the Soccer Tavern, where we're discussing the history, culture, and philosophy of the beautiful game. My name is Dave, and in this video, we're talking about the history of Southampton Football Club. Pull up a seat, and let's start the discussion. Southampton FC is located in the eastern central part of the city of Southampton. Southampton is located along the south coast of England in the United Kingdom. The club currently play in the Premier League, and its home ground is called St. Mary's Stadium, which opened in 2001 and holds about 32,500 people. The club's founding story begins in November of 1885. The leaders of St. Mary's Church in Southampton formed a young men's association for active recreation at that time. They called the new organization Southampton St. Mary's. The organization formed a soccer team and began play by late 1885. The club played for 12 seasons under the Southampton St. Mary's name before forming as an officially recognized limited company in 1897. Coinciding with the company formation, the club formally changed its name to Southampton Football Club in 1897. Southampton's nickname is the Saints. As we just discussed, the church-based roots of the club's formation are still a big part of the club's identity, hence the nickname of the Saints. It's one of the most straightforward nicknames in all of the Premier League. The crest used today was actually first designed by a fan in 1973 or 74 as part of a contest the club held. There have been slight tweaks to the crest over the past few decades, but it's been more or less the same since 1974. Cool. The club's name of Southampton FC is at the bottom of the crest. The flower is a Hampshire rose in reference to the county where the city of Southampton is located. The blue wavy lines represent the sea and local docks, as Southampton has historically been and still is an incredibly important port city for England. The tree is a reference to the nearby forest. The scarf at the top of the crest represents the fans. The soccer ball is a reference to the sport which the club plays, and the halo at the top of the crest is a nod back to Southampton's founding by church members of St. Mary's. Cool. Let's discuss two important events in the club's history in this section. First up, in the 1965-66 season, Southampton earned promotion to the First Division for the first time in the club's history. Wow. Draws against Leyton Orient and Second Division winners Manchester City in the final two matches of the season in May of 1966 were enough for the squad to finish in second place and secure promotion to the top flight. It was a joyous moment for the club and its fans. The second event I want to discuss is the most memorable day in Southampton Football Club's history. It came about 10 years later on May 1st, 1976. Southampton, then a second division side, won the FA Cup for the first time in its history. It was an incredible 1-0 victory over overwhelming favorites Manchester United. The Saints' lone goal was scored that day by Bobby Stokes late in the match to secure a shock victory. The Queen of England physically awarded the trophy that day, which was the last time that the FA Cup was awarded by the Queen herself. The 1976 FA Cup remains Southampton's only major trophy and is likely the greatest date in the club's history. The song The St. Mary's was written specifically for Southampton FC supporters in 1950, but jazz became popular shortly after the song was written. For this reason, the club's anthem sung by supporters became "Oh When the Saints Go Marching In" and has been the anthem since the 1950s.
Cool, that's interesting.
Some Saints fans get annoyed that Tottenham supporters have taken their song, as Tottenham also sings a version of "Oh When the Saints Go Marching In." Due to Tottenham's recent success and popularity, some people these days are associating the anthem more with Tottenham, even though Saints have more of a rightful claim to the anthem in their eyes. Let's discuss 5 players in this section. First up, Kevin Keegan was twice European Player of the Year, and he shockingly joined Southampton in 1980 ahead of joining Barcelona or Real Madrid. Although he was only with the club for 3 seasons, he managed to score 37 goals.
Wow.
Alan Shearer is regarded as the best striker in Premier League history. His record of 260 goals in the Premier League still stands today. Although he is more well known for his time at Blackburn Rovers and Newcastle United, he began his professional career at Southampton. Shearer scored a hat-trick at 17 years old for the Saints against Arsenal. He struggled for the next few seasons at the professional level before breaking out in the 1991-1992 season at 21 years old. He scored 21 goals in all competitions that season. That enticed Blackburn to pay an English record at that time transfer for him. He went on to have a legendary career. Next up, Matt Le Tissier likely had the greatest Southampton career of any player. He's an absolute legend for the club, spending his entire 16-year playing career with the Saints. He scored 209 goals in 540 appearances for the club and earned the nickname of Le God from supporters. Le Tissier was known for scoring spectacular goals throughout his career and was a fantastic player for the club. Gareth Bale is one of the most famous modern Southampton players. He joined the Southampton Satellite Academy in Bath at 9 years old and signed for the first team in 2006 at 16 years old. Although he only played for the club for 2 years, his formative years were spent at Southampton, and the club receives a ton of credit for developing him into the world-class player he is today. Bale was transferred to Tottenham in 2007, and then on to Real Madrid in a world record transfer at that time in 2013. Now, those 4 players were all great in their own ways. This last player we need to talk about has one of the most interesting stories in Premier League history. A man named Ali Dia got a trial with Southampton in the mid-1990s. Someone posing as former World Player of the Year George Weah was recommending him to different clubs in England. Southampton gave him a 2-week trial based on this recommendation, which actually turned out to be bogus. After only 1 training session, the Saints were forced to put Ali Dia into a match due to an injury crisis for the club. He did absolutely terribly in his one and only appearance for Southampton, and this infamous story is still one of the greatest mysteries in Premier League history. Ed Bates is the club's all-time winningest manager with 346 wins. He managed Southampton from 1955 until 1973 and was a former player, which earned him the nickname of Mr. Southampton. Cool. Bates led the Saints into the first division for the first time in the club's history, and there is a statue outside of Southampton's home ground of Mr. Bates honoring his contributions to the club. Laurie McMenemy is the other manager I'd like to mention here. He was manager for the most successful period in Southampton's history. McMenemy managed Southampton from 1973 to 1985. He led the club to their only major trophy that
That's a mouthful right there. McMenemy? Oh my god. Oh my goodness. McMenemy. Need some McFriends to make some McEnemies. McMenemies. That's awesome. I love that. Another thing while we're paused, I didn't pause a lot this time. It's a shorter one of Dave's videos. But I do want to come back to this point is I love how players get their start in the club and they'll go through their whole career hopping around clubs. Maybe not so much hopping around clubs, but they're so loyal to that one, their first club. And usually they'll come back and help coach or help be a part of it. So even though they're gone off the pitch, they're still not out of the club. So to me, that's pretty cool because you don't see that. You don't see, in our instance, NFL players come back and help coach for the teams that, let's say, drafted them or gave them a chance. So anyway, I love that. I love that. I just wanted to point that out there real quick.
1976 FA Cup final that we discussed in our important events section. He also led the club to finishing in second place in the Old First Division, Southampton's highest ever finish. McMenemy signed some of the most talented players in Europe during his tenure and built the Saints into a formidable club, making a handful of other cup finals during his time in charge. Southampton's biggest rival is definitely Portsmouth FC. The cities of Southampton and Portsmouth are about 30 miles apart along England's south coast. The clubs haven't met too many times on the pitch, relatively speaking, in their 100-plus year existence, which has actually helped fuel this rivalry. It started to really pick up steam in the 1950s and 60s when Portsmouth was falling down the divisions and Southampton was rising up the divisions. There was some resentment built up among fans at this time, and hooliganism started to come into English soccer in the late 1960s. The resentment, coupled with the violence brought on by hooligans, took the rivalry into a fierce derby. Since the clubs haven't met too often over the years, that pent-up aggression and hatred from the rivalry really explodes whenever they do meet. So even though Portsmouth is in the lower divisions while Southampton is in the Premier League right now, the rivalry doesn't look to be dissipating anytime soon.
Interesting.
Far back of the rivalry with Portsmouth would be Southampton's rivalry with AFC Bournemouth. As we mentioned in our AFC Bournemouth video, this isn't much of a rivalry right now. But with both clubs having extended runs in the Premier League and both battling relegation this season, it has the potential to become a bigger rivalry. Both clubs are along England's south coast, both play in the Premier League now, but the rivalry kind of can be traced back to 2011 when both clubs were in League One, England's third division. It's not a huge rivalry right now, but it definitely has potential and is worth a mention here. The stats and records we're about to discuss are as of March 2018, which is when we are recording this video. Southampton have spent 41 seasons in the top flight in their history. The club's only major trophy is the 1976 FA Cup. The club's record first-team league appearance holder is Terry Payne with 713 appearances. The club's record league goal scorer is Mike Channon with 185 goals. The Saints' record transfer purchase was Guido Carrillo from AS Monaco on January 25th, 2018 for about £19 million. And the club's record transfer sale was Virgil van Dijk to Liverpool FC on January 1st, 2018 for about £75 million. And one last interesting fact about the club, on October 22nd, 1988, Southampton fielded Danny, Rodney, and Raymond Wallace in their match against Sheffield Wednesday. This was significant because the Saints became the first club to include three brothers in the same first division match in England. So, there you have it. A bit of history on Southampton Football Club. Let's continue the discussion in the comment section below the video. Thanks for stopping by the Soccer Tavern. Hope to see you again.
Hey, wow, that was pretty awesome. I think that little tidbit, there were three brothers at one point in a match. Like that's cool. That's cool. That's super cool. Did they do good? Were they good? I don't even know. I guess you have to be good to be in a Premier League team, but still, that's pretty cool, man. What a proud mom. Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, you are up to bat, but first, let us cue the graphics.
We're discussing the history, culture, and philosophy of the beautiful game. My name is Dave, and in this video, we're talking about Tottenham Hotspur Football Club's history. Pull up a seat, and let's start the discussion. Tottenham is located in the northern part of the City of London. The City of London is located in the southern central part of England in the United Kingdom. The club currently play in the Premier League, and its home ground for this season is Wembley Stadium, which holds about 90,000 people.
90,000
Tottenham is currently building an upgraded stadium on the same ground as its old stadium, White Hart Lane. The club played at Old White Hart Lane from 1899 to 2017, and it held about 36,000 people. The new White Hart Lane is scheduled to open for the 2018-2019.
Let me know how much does this new stadium sit? All right, or if they're done building it. But it says 2018-2019 season, so this thing should have been done. So anyway, let me know in the comments how many people can this thing hold? The new one. All right, from 36,000, did it increase to a lot more? All right, let's get back in.
Season and has a capacity of about 62,000 people. In September of 1882, the Hotspur Football Club was formed as an offshoot of the Hotspur Cricket Club. Okay. The Cricket Club was founded 2 years earlier, and the football club was started as an activity for the cricket members to perform during the winter. Another
thing I've noticed with Crystal Palace. I was about to say Crystal City. Crystal Palace, same thing. Their football club originated out of the need to stay, I guess, match fit for cricket players. So this is kind of like OGs, right? The OGs were all cricket players. In my mind, that's how I see it. The old school 1880, 1860s, you had a lot of, hey man, you play professional football, like, no, I'm really a cricket player, but I do play football on the downtime. So, yeah.
Most of the founding members of the football club were local schoolboys from St. John's Presbyterian School and Tottenham Grammar School. In 1884, the club received some letters intended for a different Hotspur FC, also based in the City of London. So a choice was made to attach the local neighborhood of Tottenham to the club's name to avoid confusion with their neighbors in West London. Since 1884, the club has been known as Tottenham Hotspur FC. Tottenham has two nicknames, Spurs and the Lily Whites. The Spurs nickname obviously comes from the club's name of Hotspur, but what does that actually mean? Well, Hotspur comes from a 14th century knight named Sir Henry Percy, who fought valiantly in battle while leading troops during the Middle Ages. He was fearless and often charged into battle wearing spurs. Sir Percy's behavior on the battlefield earned him the nickname of Hotspur. Additionally, Sir Percy's family owned large amounts of land in the area of London that became Tottenham. When founding members of the cricket club met to decide on a name, Hotspur was suggested in admiration of the local knight, Sir Percy, and in the hopes that the team would emulate his characteristics while playing. So that's where the name comes from. The club's other nickname of the Lily Whites simply comes from the white color of Tottenham's kit, which is considered lily white. Tottenham's present crest is a bird on top of an old-looking soccer ball. This appears a bit odd at first glance, but once you understand the backstory behind it, it makes a bit more sense. In 1909, former Spurs player W.J. Scott commissioned a copper statue to be built with this image to celebrate Tottenham's first ever promotion to the top flight. The club placed this statue on top of the west stand of White Hart Lane. The bird is a cockerel, also known as a rooster. Fighting cockerels wear spurs on their feet and are fearsome looking, hence the association between the club and this image. The ball is a depiction of the soccer ball that would have been used around 1909. Though this was built in 1909, the club didn't use it as a crest until 1966. Then, the club has used differing crests, but they've all more or less included this image. In 2006, the club unveiled the current crest used today, which is simply a cleaner, more modern-looking version of the statue from 1909 and crest first used in 1966. Now let's talk about four important events in the club's history. On April 28, 1951, Tottenham beat Sheffield Wednesday 1-0 at home in the second-to-last match of that season. The goal was scored by Len Dukeman and sealed Tottenham's first ever top-flight title. About a decade later, Tottenham won the First Division title and FA Cup in the 1960-61 season. 10 years after that first title, the club played Sheffield Wednesday yet again at home on April 17, 1961. Spurs won 2-1 to secure their second and most recent First Division title. 1 month later, the club played Leicester City at Wembley in the final of the FA Cup on May 6th. Tottenham won 2-0 with second-half goals from Bobby Smith and Terry Dyson. Tottenham were the first English club to win the double, which is the FA Cup and First Division title in the same season in the 20th century. This historic season is easily the greatest in the club's history. Our third event happened on May 15, 1963, when Spurs accomplished another historic feat. On this date, the club beat Atletico Madrid 5-1 in the final of the European Cup Winners' Cup to become the first British club to win a European trophy. And the last event I want to highlight here is not related to a match, but it is still important in the club's modern history. In 1991, with Tottenham £20 million in debt, then manager Terry Venables and a man named Alan Sugar teamed up to buy the club. Venables was a former player and very familiar with the soccer world. Sugar had no experience with soccer and proceeded to upset and alienate the fans. The next 10 years were rocky between ownership and fans, with Sugar firing Venables shortly after taking over the club. By 2001, Sugar sold a majority stake to current Tottenham owners before fully divesting ownership in 2007. Although the relationship was rocky, Sugar did rescue the club from a rough financial position at that time, and it was incredibly important in the club's history.
Interesting. So
Tottenham fans...
So it was one of those things where, like, we don't like him, he doesn't get us, but his business mind was there, so it's like we gotta tolerate him. That sucks. That. I know something about that. A little bit. All right. I mean, that's interesting. Like the whole Spurs thing. It comes out of a night. Come on, guys. Spurs don't come out of a night. The night wore Spurs into battle. That's cool. There's not more teams like that named after a night. It's pretty sweet. I don't know. We have a soft spot here for nights on the channel. All right.
Are likely most well known for the song "Oh When the Spurs Go Marching In." The song is a slow build and seemingly the entire stadium gets involved, which makes this a truly epic experience. Okay. Other clubs and fans have versions of the song, but due to Tottenham's recent rise in performance and popularity, the song is most associated with Spurs these days. Jimmy Greaves was one of the greatest goal scorers in British soccer history. He is Tottenham's all-time leading goal scorer and was signed from AC Milan after beginning his career at Chelsea. While with Spurs, Greaves won 2 FA Cups, the European Cup Winners' Cup, and 42 England caps. He left in 1970 as the club's all-time record goal scorer, which he remains as to this day.
Cool.
Paul Gascoigne only had a brief couple of seasons with the club, but his talents were unquestionable. He joined in 1988 for a then-record British transfer fee of £2.3 million. He was on the Tottenham roster for the famous 1990 World Cup, where his performances earned him the love of the entire nation. Shortly after, Gascoigne moved to Lazio and his career unfortunately fell off the rails, but his time with Tottenham was arguably his high point. David Ginola was exceptionally talented and won the 1999 Player of the Year award from both the English Premier League, Players' Union, and the Writers' Union. He was the first player from a club outside of the top 6 to...
Please let me know, what is a Writers' Union? Because he just like says that I'm supposed to know it or what that is. I don't know what that is. What is a Writers' Union? I haven't the faintest of clues. Please let me know. Thanks, guys.
To win that award. Gareth Bale joined in 2007 as an unproven left back. He struggled early in his Tottenham career, but his physical tools forced him into more attacking positions for the club, and he absolutely thrived. Okay. He was dominant and scored many goals for Tottenham, with plenty of them being wonder strikes from outside of the box. His 42 goals in 146 appearances for the club attracted Real Madrid, who bid £85 million for him in 2013. That was a world record at that time. Also, the current crop of Tottenham players are very talented. They're led by Harry Kane, who was born 5 miles from White Hart Lane and has been with Tottenham since he was 11 years old. Okay. Arthur Rowe took over as manager in 1949 while the club was in the second division. He implemented a push and run tactics approach to the game, with his players passing and moving that proved incredibly effective. Tottenham won promotion that season and followed it up with a first division title in his second season. Although he didn't follow...
Push and run. Okay. So this is really only the second style of football that we've heard of on the channel. The other one is like, what was it called? Tiki-taki. I don't know what that is, but this is the only the second different type of style that's been mentioned on the channel so far. So tiki-taki and push and run. Okay. So anyway, just putting it out there, just notes for myself really when I watch these back, and also you can just be like, actually, Daniel, and correct me, please, if I'm wrong. But all right, guys.
Followed up with any other major trophies and was gone by 1955, he deserves mention here. Unquestionably, the greatest manager in Tottenham's history was Bill Nicholson. He was a fantastic servant to the club as a player, making over 300 appearances for Spurs before joining as an assistant manager in 1955. He became full-time manager in 1958 and led the club until 1974. Nicholson managed a club record 832 matches and won 8 major trophies, including the 1961 double and the 1963 UEFA Cup Winners' Cup we've already discussed. He managed during the most successful time in the club's history and is an absolute legend for the club. Keith Birkinshaw is the second most successful manager in the club's history. He managed from 1976 to 1984, winning 2 FA Cups and a UEFA Cup, the predecessor to the Europa League. All told, Birkinshaw managed 431 matches for the club and went out on top after winning the 1984 UEFA Cup. And finally, Mauricio Pochettino deserves mention here. He is the club's current manager and has proven to be one of the most talented and sought-after young managers in the world. Still without a major title at time of recording, if Pochettino stays at Tottenham and continues building his squad, he could be considered one of the greatest managers in Tottenham history. Spurs' 2 main rivals these days are Arsenal and Chelsea. As we discussed in our Arsenal video, the North London derby rivalry began when Arsenal moved to Highbury in 1910. Highbury was only about 5 miles from where Tottenham played at White Hart Lane. The rivalry really escalated when Arsenal were infamously voted into the First Division in 1919 at the expense of Tottenham. Years of animosity between the clubs and important matches played only a few miles apart have helped grow this rivalry into one of the most intense in the Premier League. As we mentioned in our Chelsea video, the rivalry between Tottenham and Chelsea can be traced back to the 1967 FA Cup final. That was the first FA Cup final to be contested.
But it's not 1919. You know what I mean? 1919, you shoved them out. That's a derby. That's a derby of just contention. F you guys. We have a massive chip on our shoulder. Chelsea, okay. I mean, as far as derbies go, that's pretty recent, right? 1967. That's a generational gap. I could say that at least. So I could. It's like newer than 1919, right? So that's what I'm learning as well, is that these derbies are no joke. All right, whether they stem from geographical type derbies or let's say warring coaches within the Premier League, that's another escalation. Like, there's so many different layers of a derby. So I think after we get through watching some highlights of different matches that you guys have suggested, I would love to check out some derby matches, and maybe if there's anything out there that grasps the intensity of a derby match, like, yeah. Anyway, like, at least try to, from an outsider's perspective, just so I can understand it. Like, I mean, the only way I'm really going to understand this is actually by going. Like, I get that. So I want to get as far as trying to feel what it's like without fully going just yet. Obviously, Spencer and I have plans to get over there at some point. But I would like to know what I'm getting into a little bit, if that makes any sense. Just check the waters before I just dive in. All right? Enough talk. Sorry, guys.
From 2 clubs from London. Spurs won the match 2-1 with 2 former Chelsea players, which helped ignite animosity between the sides. In the 1974-75 season, the 2 clubs were battling to avoid relegation from the First Division and met in a late season match. Spurs won that 2-0 and effectively relegated Chelsea that season. Chelsea turned the rivalry around in the 90s, not losing a match for 16 years between 1990 and 2006. Since then, both clubs have built themselves into trophy contenders annually, and matches between the clubs are always physical battles. The most memorable recent match was the battle at the Bridge. Tottenham was chasing Leicester City for the league title in 2016. The club needed to win at Stamford Bridge to keep its title hopes alive. In an incredibly physical match that ended 2-2 and should have seen multiple Tottenham players sent off but inexplicably weren't, Chelsea ended Tottenham's championship hopes that season, which helped intensify this rivalry. The stats and records we're going to discuss are as of March 2018, which is when we are recording this video. Tottenham have spent 83 seasons in the top flight in its history. The club has 17 major trophies, including 8 FA Cups, 4 League Cups, 2 First Division titles, 2 UEFA Cups, which was the predecessor to the Europa League, and 1 European Cup Winners' Cup. The club's record first-team league appearance holder is Steve Perryman with 655 appearances. The club's record goal scorer is Jimmy Greaves with 266 goals. Spurs' record transfer purchase was Davinson Sanchez from Ajax in the Netherlands on August 18, 2017 for about £42 million. And the club's record transfer sale was Gareth Bale to Real Madrid in Spain on September 1st, 2013 for about £85 million. And one last interesting fact about the club, Tottenham are the only non-league side to have won the FA Cup after the formation of the Football League in 1888. Spurs won it in 1901 after competing in the Southern League that season.
So, there you have it, guys. There you have it. Tottenham Hotspur. What'd you guys think? I thought this was awesome. I thought the fact that the Hotspur is the Spurs, that whole history behind that after the whole night is kind of cool. It's definitely beloved by the channel. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying this is the team, my team, but hey, I dig that backstory. I dig that.
West Ham United Football Club. You are up to bat. Cue graphics. I'm excited. Let's get into this. Today we have our good friend Dave from the Soccer Tavern. We understand it is football, and we also understand that this is 5 years old. So, we're going to be looking at this. Let's see what West Ham United is all about. A long time ago, I don't know when, I think it was maybe the early stages of Embrace the Suck 21, we had picked names out of a hat to support clubs because we didn't know how to do it. West Ham United was the team that I pulled out of the hat.
Discussing the history, culture, and philosophy of the beautiful game. My name is Dave, and in this video we're talking about West Ham United Football Club's history. Pull up a seat and let's start the discussion. West Ham is located in the eastern part of the city of London, though not quite as east as it used to be, which we'll talk about later in the video. London is located in the southern central part of England in the United Kingdom. The club currently play in the Premier League, and its home ground is called the London Stadium, which opened in 2012 for the Olympics, but West Ham moved in 2016. The stadium holds about 57,000 people. Wow. West Ham's former stadium was a few miles further east and was called the Bowling Ground, but it was more commonly known as Upton Park, named after the surrounding area. Okay. That held about 35,000 people. Wow, the club traces its origin back to 1895. At that time, Arnold Hills, who was the managing director for the Thames Ironworks and Shipbuilding Company, was persuaded to start a soccer club. He was persuaded by one of his foremen named Dave Taylor, who was also a local soccer referee. All right. In June of 1895, the Thames Ironworks Football Club was formally announced in the company's newspaper. The club played matches in different competitions over a 5-year period, but were finally elected to a formal league, the Southern League, in 1900. Coupled with this move to the Southern League, the club was officially incorporated on July 5th, 1900. With the incorporation, the club changed its colors from all blue to their well-known colors of claret and blue. Additionally, with the incorporation of the club as its own company came a name change to West Ham United Football Club after the county borough where the club played. The club has been West Ham United FC ever since 1900. West Ham have 3 nicknames: the Irons, the Hammers, and the Academy of Football. The Irons and Hammers nicknames both derive from the club's association with the Thames Ironworks and Shipbuilding Company. Okay. Irons and hammers were tools or materials used by employees in shipbuilding and carried over to the club as nicknames. Additionally, to dispel any confusion, the Hammers nickname has nothing to do with the club having ham in its name. That's merely a coincidence. The Academy of Football nickname is more of a club motto. It came about in the 1950s when the club made a commitment to youth development. West Ham had 3 influential players on the 1966 World Cup winning England squad. Fans claim, often partially joking but kind of not joking, that the club won the World Cup. West Ham and their fans are fiercely proud of their commitment to youth development and view the academy as one of the best in the world. Hence the Academy of Football nickname, as it slightly implies that it is the best academy for the sport in the world. The current crest was chosen from a fan vote in 2014. The crest is a claret shield outlined in blue, which are the club's main colors. At the top of the crest is the club's name. The middle of the shield depicts 2 crossed hammers representing the tools used by the club's founding players in the local shipyard. A crest with crossed hammers was first recorded to have been worn by the club in the 1923 FA Cup final, so this harkens back almost 100 years. Finally, the City of London, where the club is located, is at the bottom. One more point of note is that crests used before the current crest often included a castle in the background behind 2 crossed hammers. The castle was the Boleyn Castle. That was a local name for the Green Street house, as it was believed Anne Boleyn, Queen of England in the 16th century, owned or at least lived in the house. The dates of the house being built and her death don't really add up, so it's unlikely she ever lived in the building. But this video is about West Ham, not the monarchy, so let's not go down that rabbit hole. The Boleyn Castle stood next to the ground where West...
I was like, pump the brakes, bro. This is supposed to be about football. I thought we were about to go down a rabbit hole. I was like, don't do it. Don't do it, Dave. Don't freaking do it. Stay in your lane. Crisis averted. Let's get back into it.
West Ham's old stadium was located until the castle was demolished in 1955. This is why West Ham's old stadium was named the Boleyn Ground.
Okay.
Let's discuss 3 important events in West Ham's history now. On May 2nd, 1964, West Ham United won their first major trophy as the Hammers beat Preston North End 3-2 in the FA Cup final at Wembley Stadium in London. West Ham trailed twice in the match, going down 1-0 and then 2-1, but scored equalizing goals each time. With time winding down, Jeff Hurst beat several Preston defenders and found Peter Brabrook out wide in the 90th minute. Brabrook sent in a cross that Ronnie Boyce met with his head and nodded home a last-minute game-winning goal for the club's first major piece of silverware. The Hammers followed that first major trophy by winning its second only a year later. On May 19, 1965, the club met TSV Munich 1860 in the European Cup Winners' Cup final at Wembley. 100,000 people witnessed the club win its first and so far only major European trophy. The match was described as a magnificent game with beautiful and flowing play from both sides. West Ham prevailed through Alan Sealey's 2 second-half goals in a 3-minute span. The last event I want to talk about is one that occurred off the pitch. On March 22nd, 2013, West Ham United beat out other London soccer clubs, including Tottenham Hotspur and Leyton Orient, to secure a 99-year lease for the London Olympic Stadium. The stadium was built for the 2012 Olympics and was located about 3.5 miles west of the Boleyn Ground. The stadium's seating capacity was about 20,000 more than the Boleyn Ground, and the West Ham owners promised that it would usher in a new era for the club. The Hammers moved into the new stadium for the 2016-17 season, but the move hasn't been nearly as positive as promised. Fans have struggled to adapt to the stadium being in a new area. 3.5 miles may not seem like a lot, but it can't really be understated that a club's home ground really has a place in the community.
100%. If we've learned anything, you don't move, you build up. Get it. It'd be nice. That's such a proud moment. Oh, we got the Olympic Stadium for 100 years, for another freaking century almost. And then on the other side, it's like, but this is home. This is our stadium. That's a tough one. I don't know. I think I would always go for the Olympic Stadium. That's me. And that's why I'm trying to learn the ins and outs of this, because I would love that. That'd be cool as shit. Olympic Stadium. Yeah, that's awesome. But then again, 3 miles might as well be 100 miles if you're leaving home. You know what I mean? Anyway.
Many decades-old traditions for attending matches had to be completely changed, which supporters may have been okay with if the owners lived up to their promises. Sadly, the owners haven't, and West Ham are currently in a relegation fight this season. Tensions between supporters and ownership are close to an all-time high. A lot of this tension stems from the club being awarded the lease to the Olympic Stadium back in March of 2013. West Ham supporters sing the song "I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles." It comes from a Broadway show called The Passing Show of 1918 and became popular in Britain in the 1920s. The origins of this song as it relates to West Ham is a bit convoluted. One story is that Will Murray, a West Ham Youth Academy player from the 1920s, was nicknamed Bubbles because he looked like a character from a soap advertisement. Reportedly, one of his teachers attended a match and sung the song to him during the match, with other supporters catching on. Another story is that West Ham fans picked up the song from Swansea supporters. It is recorded that Swansea fans sung the song in their January 1921 FA Cup match against Bury. The Swans played West Ham in the FA Cup final the following season, and it's possible West Ham supporters picked up the song then, but couldn't really be confirmed. There are other stories as well, but none could be fully verified. What we do know is that "I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles" was sung in air raid shelters during World War II in London. and the first record of West Ham supporters singing the song is from the 1940 Football League War Cup final when the Irons beat Blackburn.
Wow, man.
The song remained popular throughout the war, which helped the song become a tradition for West Ham supporters that still continues to today. Sir Bobby Moore captained West Ham for more than 10 years during his 16-year West Ham career. He also captained England to the World Cup title in 1966 and is widely regarded as one of the best defenders of all time. Pele stated Moore as the best defender he ever played against, and Sir Bobby won many awards throughout his career with the club. Sir Geoff Hurst won the 1966 World Cup with England. He scored a hat-trick in the final, the only male player ever to do that. His legendary performance in that World Cup somewhat overshadowed his exemplary West Ham career. He scored 249 goals for the club, helped the Hammers win their first FA Cup title, and was named Hammer of the Year 3 times during his tenure at the club. Trevor Booking spent 17 years at West Ham, winning 2 FA Cups with the team and 4 Hammer of the Year awards as an individual. He remained with the club as it was relegated and is widely considered as one of the top 5 players ever in the history of the club. He's still involved behind the scenes at the club, and in 2009, a stand at West Ham's old stadium, the Boleyn Ground, was named after him.
Cool.
Recent players like Rio Ferdinand, Michael Carrick, Joe Cole, Frank Lampard, and others have come through West Ham's famed youth academy and have went on to have great careers with other clubs. There are many other players from West Ham's glorious past, but in the essence of time, let's continue. The 3 managers I want to highlight here were 3 consecutive managers for the club from the 1950s through the 1980s. Ted Fenton became West Ham manager in 1950 and is credited with creating and building the Academy of Football at West Ham. He developed new tactics and philosophies of scouting, player development, recruiting, and training, resulting in a West Ham way of living and playing. He found and developed Sir Bobby Moore and Sir Geoff Hurst, in addition to many other great players for West Ham. Fenton led the club back to the top flight in 1958 after a 26-year absence, but he wasn't able to win any major trophies with the club. He was fired in 1961, with Ron Greenwood taking over the club. Ron Greenwood became West Ham manager in April 1961. He continued to develop the Academy of Football, which paid dividends for the club shortly into his tenure. He won the club's first ever major trophy, the 1964 FA Cup, and followed that up by winning the 1965 European Cup Winners' Cup that we talked about earlier. Greenwood continued to lead the club until 1974, when he moved into a general manager role and his assistant, John Lyall, took over as manager. Lyall was statistically the greatest manager in club history. He managed the club for a record 770 matches and won 2 FA Cups. He also led the club to its highest ever league position, 3rd in the First Division in the 1985-86 season. It wasn't all roses during his tenure, as the club suffered relegation in the late 1970s, but Lyall rebuilt the side, committed to playing the West Ham way of attacking attractive soccer, and built the club back into a very competitive and respectable squad for most of the 1980s. Unfortunately, the club suffered relegation in the 1988-89 season, and Lyall left the club.
Now, hear me out. Oh my God. I don't know how there's no comparable feeling to, no, let me rephrase this. Relegation must be like a kick in the nuts times a million. Like, so clubs, and I feel like after relegation, you have a year. In my mind, like, okay, we got relegated. I have a year to prove this shit and get back in. Like, okay, we got a fluke, but it mentally, psychologically, that must be tough to try to fight your way back up. Anyway, I don't know what I'm trying to compare. There's nothing I can compare it to. Excuse me, on this side of the sports spectrum, across the pond, I couldn't imagine. It'd be like if an NFL team lost its NFL ship and turned into a college football team. Maybe. Anyway, I'm trying to make comparisons that don't exist. Sorry, guys. And also, thank you for sticking it out with me, drinking this. I need it, so I know. I'm not trying to disrespect the video at all.
It wasn't the way he would have wanted to go out, but he is still regarded as one of the best managers in club history.
Oh, right.
The Hammers have 3 rivals, all based in London: Chelsea, Tottenham, and Millwall. Matches between Chelsea and West Ham are called District Line derbies in reference to the subway or tube route connecting the two London-based clubs. Both clubs have been around for a long time, but the rivalry really intensified during the hooligan days of the 1970s and 80s. Both clubs had some of the most notorious firms or gangs in the hooligan era, which helped make this a big rivalry. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Chelsea began poaching some of the best players from West Ham's famous youth academy, which helped seal this as a rivalry for West Ham supporters. West Ham's other Premier League London-based rival is Tottenham Hotspur. Both clubs were in similar competitive positions in the 1990s, which helped seal this rivalry. Now, Tottenham supporters these days may claim that West Ham isn't a real rival. In the 2000s, Tottenham has grown into a stable Premier League side that competes at the top end of the table, while West Ham have gone through periods of struggle, including a handful of relegations the past few decades. There's definitely still something for both sets of supporters in this rivalry, though. Like Chelsea, Spurs have recruited some of West Ham's best youth players. Additionally, West Ham won the rights to using the London Olympic Stadium at the expense of Tottenham, which forced Spurs to spend hundreds of millions of pounds building their own stadium. That created some tension between executives at both clubs, which adds to this rivalry. And that brings us to our last rival. Millwall is without question West Ham's biggest rival. Both clubs have their roots based in shipbuilding docks on either side of the River Thames. There was a natural rivalry between workers at competing companies, but in 1926, the Millwall shipyard dock workers broke a strike which increased the rift with West Ham supporters. Throughout the 30s and 40s, the rivalry cooled a bit as the clubs didn't play each other much. But by the 1960s, a culture of bragging and boasting about fighting developed among the supporters of both clubs. Mainly, this bragging came about from the glorification of gang culture in London at that time.
Interesting.
This culture, combined with the hooliganism of the 1970s and 80s, made matches between these two clubs an excuse for mass brawling among supporters. It is still the most violent and toxic derby in London and possibly all of England, even though the clubs haven't played much in recent years. The rivalry is rooted in the working class communities of both sets of supporters and isn't going away anytime soon. The stats and records we're about to discuss are as of March 2018, which is when we are recording this video. The Irons have spent 60 seasons in the top flight in their history. The club has 4 major trophies, including 3 FA Cups and 1 European Cup Winners' Cup. The club's record first team appearance holder is Billy Bonds with 799 appearances.
Wow, man.
The club's record goal scorer is Vic Watson with 326 goals. The club's record transfer purchase was Marko Arnautovic from Stoke City FC on July 22, 2017 for about £20 million initially, plus a potential £5 million more in add-ons. And the club's record transfer sale was Dimitri Payet to Olympique Marseille in France on January 29, 2017 for about £25 million. And one last interesting fact about the club, West Ham United are the last team to have won the FA Cup from outside the top division.
Wow.
The Hammers beat Arsenal 1-0 in the final of the 1980 FA Cup while playing that season in the old second division, now known as the Championship.
Cool. West Ham United. All right. Man. Well, this was, remember guys, this was the team that I did pick out of the hat. Fate picked this team for me. So let me know any more behind the scenes things about this, maybe the rivalries, because you know, I saw a couple comments saying that, well, you know, we don't really see it as a rivalry per se, but these derbies on the West Ham side seem interesting. You know, especially the one it has with Chelsea. Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. You're up to bat. Cue graphics. Good old Dave from the Soccer Tavern.
Welcome to the Soccer Tavern, where we're discussing the history, culture, and philosophy of the beautiful game. My name is Dave, and in this video we're talking about the history of Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. Pull up a seat and let's start the discussion. Wolverhampton Wanderers FC is located in the central part of the city of Wolverhampton. Wolverhampton is located in the central part of England in the United Kingdom. The club currently plays in the Premier League, and its home ground is called the Molineux Stadium. The Molineux opened in 1889 and currently holds about 32,000 people.
What? Wait.
Wolverhampton began as a...
The stadium opened in 1889, and that's the that's crazy. That's insane. Okay, Cool.
School team in 1877 at the St. Luke's School in Blakenhall, which is a southern neighborhood in the city of Wolverhampton. The team was founded after the school's headmaster, Harry Barcroft, awarded the best performing students a soccer ball as a prize for their efforts during the school year.
Cool.
2 students named Jack Brody and John Bainton are credited with convincing the other students to form a team with their new ball. The team played for 2 years before it merged with another club called the Blakenhall Wanderers.
Nice.
It became Wolverhampton Wanderers after the merger. That is its current name today. Cool. The club played in a variety of colors in its early years before first playing in their now famous black and gold kits in the 1891-1892 season. Okay. The gold color came from the borough's coat of arms, and the black color was a reference to the local area being called the Black Country. Additionally, the colors are rumored to also represent the city's motto of "Out of darkness cometh light." Black allegedly represents darkness, and gold represents light. The club is nicknamed Wolves. Unsurprisingly, this comes from the city where the club is based. Wolverhampton was founded in 985 AD by King Edgar's sister, Wulfrun, which is where the city gets its name. Wolverhampton has one of the most unique and distinguishable crests in all of English soccer. The current crest has been used since 2002 and most closely resembles the crest first used in 1979. It's a menacing-looking wolf with sharp edges in the design. The colors of black and gold come from the club's main kit colors. A wolf first appeared on a Wolverhampton crest in the early 1970s and has been included in every crest since. The only exception to this was a 3-year period in the 1990s when the club used the Wolverhampton coat of arms for 3 years between 1993 and 1996. Thankfully, the club went back to a wolf head crest design, which was similar to the current crest used today, before updating the design to the current crest in 2002. Wolverhampton was one of the founding members of the Football League on April 17, 1888 at the Royal Hotel in Manchester. Right. This league laid the foundations for what eventually became the English football pyramid and eventually, over 100 years later, the Premier League. The next event I'd like to mention happened in 1954. In the spring of 1954, Wolves clinched their first ever First Division championship over rivals West Bromwich Albion. This was monumental in the club's history, but Wolves had an even bigger event happen later in 1954. Oh. On December 13, 1954, the English champion Wolves hosted Hungarian champion Honvéd under the floodlights at the Molineux Stadium. The Honvéd side included 6 Hungarians who had recently embarrassed the English national team in 2 matches at the international level. The second half of the match was broadcast live on the BBC, which was incredibly rare at that time. Honvéd led 2-0 within 14 minutes of the match starting, but Wolves manager Stan Cullis ordered the grounds crew to heavily water the pitch at halftime to slow Honvéd down. Wolves then scored 3 second-half goals to win the match 3-2, and the British press crowned them champions of the world. The popularity and media...
Did this man just say they watered the pitch? Okay, cool. That's ballsy. Ballsy. All right.
Attention from this match was the catalyst for the creation of the European Cup, now known as the Champions League. The next event I'd like to discuss is from 1990. Lifelong Wolves fan Sir Jack Hayward bought the club for £2 million that year. Over the next 17 years, Hayward would reportedly invest more than £70 million of his own personal wealth into the club. The investment went mainly into redeveloping the Molineux Stadium to bring it into line with increasing stadium infrastructure requirements in England. Okay. Sir Jack also helped to stabilize the club financially under his ownership. He was a great servant to the club, and there is a statue outside of the Molineux Stadium commemorating Sir Jack Hayward and the next event I'd like to highlight. On May 26, 2003, Wolves beat Sheffield United 3-0 in the second flight playoff final to qualify for the Premier League, so the top division, for the first time in 19 years. Mark Kennedy, Nathan Blake, and Kenny Miller were the scorers on the day, and the following season was the one and only season in the top flight for Wolves under Sir Jack's ownership. Cool. On the day of the victory, Sir Jack gave the Wolves supporters a double thumbs up, which is the pose captured in his statue outside of the Molineux. And the last event I want to mention is the purchase of Wolves by current owners, Chinese conglomerate Fosun International Group, in July of 2016. What? Fosun has pumped a ton of resources and money into the club to get it back to the Premier League. Additionally, recent reports have the ownership group worth more than £60 billion. This ownership group and its vast amount of wealth may be instrumental in Wolves remaining in the Premier League and pushing for European places for years to come. In addition to Wolves winning the league and playing Honved in 1954, the year is also significant for another reason. It corresponded with Laskar Singh and Lachman Singh attending a Wolves match with their work colleagues. Cool. This is significant because these men would create a supporters group that would eventually be named the Punjabi Wolves. The Punjabi Wolves are one of the largest ethnic supporters groups in all of England. The group is open to people of any background, but the majority of its members have ties to the Punjab region of India. Cool. These supporters are most distinctively known for their dole drum that is played before home matches and is allowed to be played throughout many away matches in the away supporters section. Cool. Wolves has many supporters from a diverse background, but I wanted to highlight this unique and trailblazing subset of supporters in this section. Billy Wright is widely considered the greatest ever player in Wolverhampton's history. Wright spent his entire career at Wolves beginning in 1938 and ending in 1959. He captained the club during its greatest ever period, won an FA Cup, 3 First Division titles, and was named Football Writers Association Footballer of the Year in 1952. Wright was a standout centre back and incredible leader along the back line. In addition to being a fixture for Wolves throughout his career, he was the first English player to earn 100 caps for his country, and he captained the national side a record 90 times.
100 caps? What is that? What is that? Did I miss something massive? It sounds like a great achievement, but what does that mean? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much.
There is a stand at the Molineux Stadium named after him and a statue outside the ground commemorating this legendary player. Bert Williams was a goalkeeper at Wolverhampton from 1945 to 1959. He was a teammate of Billy Wright during the club's most successful period and is the greatest goalkeeper in Wolves' history. Williams was only 5 feet 9 inches tall, but he had incredible reactions which earned him the nickname of the Cat. Williams made 420 appearances for the club and had 30 England caps during his career. Bill Slater joined Wolves in 1952 and was a teammate of Wright and Williams. He is generally considered one of the best players in the club's history as he was an integral member of the teams that won 3 league titles. In 1960, after Wright and Williams had retired, Slater captained Wolves to the FA Cup, which also earned him Football Writers Association Footballer of the Year in 1960. Slater and Wright are the only 2 players in the club's history to have won the FWA Footballer of the Year award. And Steve Bull is the last player I want to highlight here. He was the greatest goal scorer in the club's history. Okay. Bull joined Wolves from local rivals West Bromwich Albion in 1986 while the club was struggling in the 4th division. With Bull pumping in goals, Wolves climbed to the 2nd flight in his 13 years with the club. Though Bull didn't play in the top division with Wolves, his quality was enough that he still received 13 call-ups to the English national team during his career. Cool. He is Wolves' all-time record goal scorer by more than 100 goals after he scored more than 300 goals for the club in his career. The first manager I want to mention here is Jack Addenbrooke, who was the 2nd manager in the club's history. Addenbrooke led Wolves from 1885 to 1922 and is the longest-serving manager in the history of the club, both from a timeline and matches managed perspective. Wow. He won an FA Cup in 1908, which was the first major trophy in the club's history. The next manager I want to discuss is Stan Cullis. Cullis is by far Wolves' greatest ever manager, as he managed during the most successful period in the club's history. Cullis was in charge from 1948 to 1964 when the club won 3 First Division titles and 2 FA Cups. That was the last time the club won a top-flight title. Stan Cullis managed almost 750 matches for the club, and there is rightfully a statue outside of the Molineux Stadium in his honor. Bill McGarry led Wolves from 1968 to 1976. Under McGarry's leadership, Wolverhampton won its first ever League Cup in the 1973-1974 season, and the club made the final of the UEFA Cup, which is now known as the Europa League. During McGarry's management, the club remained in the first division until his final season when the club suffered relegation and McGarry was fired. Even though his tenure did not end on a positive note, he is one of the greatest managers in the club's history. Lastly, I wanted to quickly mention current manager Nuno Espirito Santo. He is only 44 years old and is thought of as one of the best up-and-coming managers in European soccer. If the club is able to retain his services and continue building, Nuno could become one of the best managers in club history.
Another thing that I love about, like, okay, this guy's knowledge is 5 years old, right? I love to see the comments on how it's aged since. Like that's, everyone can be hopeful about, oh man, he's going to be the best manager. And then sometimes it's like, dude, he sucked. I'm so happy he's gone. Anyway, just had to point that out. I read the comments. Thanks, guys.
Wolverhampton's 3 rivals are Stoke City, Aston Villa, and West Bromwich Albion. Stoke City are a nearby rival to Wolves. There's not much detail behind the rivalry beyond the 2 clubs are located in the same geographic area and have played many times over the years.
Okay.
Aston Villa is listed as a rival for Wolverhampton, but there truly isn't much to this rivalry. The clubs are located less than 20 miles apart. The proximity hasn't really led to a rivalry, though, as both sets of supporters don't seem to have much animosity towards each other. Additionally, the clubs have had numerous players and managers over the years move between the 2 teams. Okay. There was a bit of a bubbling to this rivalry in the 2017-2018 championship season as both clubs chased promotion, but beyond that, there isn't much to note here. And lastly, Wolverhampton's main rival is without question West Bromwich Albion. Matches between Wolves and West Brom are called the Black Country Derby. The 2 clubs are about 13 miles apart and officially first met in 1886. Matches have always been intense, but the rivalry really escalated in the 1950s when both clubs were competing at the top of the first division. The 2 sides have played more than 150 times, and this is one of the oldest rivalries in the world in terms of league soccer.
Wow.
Black Country Derby matches are actually one of the most intense in all of English soccer, with violence among fans sometimes still an issue.
Right.
The stats and records we're about to discuss are as of August 2018, which is when we are recording this video. Wolves have played 64 seasons in the top flight in its history. The club has 9 major titles, including 3 First Division championships, 4 FA Cups, and 2 League Cups. Wolverhampton's record first-team appearance holder is Derek Parkin with 609 appearances. Wolves' record goal scorer is Steve Bull with 306 goals.
Cool.
The club's record transfer purchase is Adama Traore from Middlesbrough FC on August 8th, 2018 for about £18 million. And the club's record transfer sale was Stephen Fletcher to Sunderland AFC on August 24th, 2012 for about £12 million initially, plus £2 million more in add-ons. And I want to leave you with 3 last interesting facts about the club. Wolves were awarded and scored the first ever penalty in the Football League's history. That happened on September 14th, 1891.
That's cool.
Wolverhampton were the first and so far only English club to score 100 or more goals in league play in 4 consecutive seasons.
Wow.
This happened between 1957 and 1961.
Super
and
cool.
third, Wolves were the first team to win all 4 fully professional division titles in England. The club's record-clinching title came in 1988 when it won the 4th division that season.
Hey guys, well, there you have it. Wolverhampton Wanderers. Hey, what a journey, and it's not even over. Well, listen, thank you guys for watching the video. Let me know in the comments what he missed, what's changed in those 5 years. Please let me know. Also, massive shout out to this man from 5 years ago. Dave from the Soccer Tavern. Dude, well done. You did really good when nobody else, at least from this side of the pond, even touches this stuff. So, well done to him. Salute to this man, even though he does call it soccer, which, like I wouldn't be caught dead calling it soccer anymore. Much love. Make sure you unplug and stay legendary. And thank you. Thank you so much for this, for leading me on and guiding me on this journey. All right, guys, until the next video. Later.